What you are about to see is something I can assure you that you won't find anywhere else after all. I am the only creator who not only read all the novels but also plans to narrate the events of the most important ones for your enjoyment. And I don't mean just narrating with random fan art and unrelated backgrounds, but narrating with custom gifs of each character from the series to create a setting as faithful as possible. Obviously, it won't be identical to the anime, but it is what it is. Do I sound arrogant? Maybe, but what can I say, guys? I'm at a point in my life where I feel like Subaru after the scene in Arc 6 that everyone is waiting for. Today I want to talk to you about a character who unfortunately has already finished her cycle, but at the same time, I think the general audience only knows the culmination of this character in the anime and doesn't know everything she went through to reach the end of her path. I'm talking about Elsa Granhiert, the Bowel Hunter, and the reason for your private moments when you watch the first episode of Re:Zero. Believe it or not, the events of the first and second seasons only covered 30% of everything she did in her life. What's more, I bet you didn't know that a large part of the lore we know about Conejotako is thanks to her. And that's because she has 2 long novels set in that country, the country that half the fandom wants the author to explore soon. Another equally interesting thing is that after having tried to kill Emilia, she continued to have roles in side stories, in novels that took place far from Subaru's eyes. Believe me, I will cover all the events she experienced, from her chronologically oldest novel to her most recent mention in what would eventually be a 6th season. Today, I want to pay this tribute to Elsa, and I also want to thank the strongest Elsa Granhiert fan currently, who at the time donated nearly $100 for the making of this. Now that I think about it, making this video took me more than a month. I should have charged him much, much more. Anyway, it's already done. But for the next one, I'll charge more. You've been warned. Welcome to the biggest video about the gorgeous Elsa Granhiert on the entire internet. Let's start with Elsa's oldest novel, a novel that the anime actually covered briefly. It is said that Elsa was a girl who grew up in the nation of eternal snow, Conejotako, home to one of the strongest men in the world, the Mad Prince, and also the only place in the world governed by one of the 4 great spirits, Odd Glass, someone who is in the same rank and classification as Puck. It is said and it is known that another powerful great spirit also lives in those lands who, although not part of the quartet of great spirits, for some reason lives imprisoned in the nation. This spirit is called Godogi Guadozeado, but to the young Elsa, none of that mattered. It is implied that her family, like many other families, was only focused on survival. Her parents thought the same. And that is why, as soon as need and poverty began to appear in their home, they didn't hesitate to sell her to some slave traders. The curious thing is that Elsa didn't cry or hold a grudge against her parents for this. She just accepted that things work that way, and with those thoughts, she was sold for the first time. But what no one expected is that Elsa would be sold 12 more times because, mysteriously, her owners met tragic ends after acquiring this piece of human merchandise. Fortunately for her, her first time as a slave didn't last long, and that's because when she arrived at her new home, a veteran slave who had been planning his escape for a long time caused a stir that helped Elsa escape. And even though she was chased by her captors, she was still able to lose them. But now that she wasn't someone's property, she had to get her own food and shelter, so she joined a band of orphan children with whom she lived for a time. But it seems that this band of children didn't do simple jobs and didn't depend on charity to survive either, but did whatever was necessary to keep existing, since it is said that it was in those days that Elsa committed her first murder. Sometime later, the incident that the anime narrated would happen. After stealing liquor from the local liquor store, Elsa flees into the snow but is chased and caught by the owner, who, after landing several blows to her stomach and leaving her lying in the snow, decided to give in to his base instincts and started touching her in ways I cannot describe due to YouTube's monetization policies. Because the man was focused on her body, Elsa decided to grab some shards of glass that had broken after she fell into the snow, and then she proceeded to make a cut on her abuser, one that would end this man's life while his guts fell onto her, giving her a warmth she had never felt before. And thus, her fixation for opening the guts of others was born. Something curious that I think is worth adding is that the liquor that saved Elsa is named Granhiert. It is known in the world of Re:Zero that this liquor is so good that not only did Rosewall and Russell once celebrate by drinking a liquor of that brand when they met, but Reed Astria himself also holds this drink in high regard. After this, Elsa would be caught and then sold as a slave again by Oliver, a person whom I don't know if we should consider a friend of Elsa, but in a strange way, Elsa and Oliver had a peculiar relationship. Not a romantic one, but they showed consideration for each other even though Oliver was the person who sold her to the slave traders. Whenever her new slave owners mysteriously died, Elsa would return to Oliver's shop to be sold again. The girl returned so many times that Oliver began to consider her a kind of cursed merchandise from which he was never going to be able to free himself. But even so, he grudgingly accepted to sell her again, until one day a peculiar buyer would arrive, one who would start the plot of this novel and who was the culprit for turning Elsa into a cursed doll. I am talking about Holiseo Featheron, a high-ranking official of the Church of Gustako, meaning this man was no ordinary person. He was someone who truly belonged to the Gustekian big leagues, and that will be proven later. Curiously, the day Elsa was bought, Holiseo went with two of his other slaves, Sithonia and Dorothea. These would be characters who would have an important role in the future of this novel. Already at the mansion, Elsa couldn't quite adapt with her new sisters, at least not in the first few days. Although Sithonia tried to assign her certain household chores like cooking, washing, or cleaning, Elsa was useless for those kinds of things. It is said that she made a mess despite her attempts, so Sithonia gave up on her and would send her out of the house. It should be noted that they lived in a place where it didn't snow. How is it possible that it doesn't snow if they are in Gustako? Well, that's because the Gustekian aristocracy had parcels of land in their possession where snow mysteriously didn't reach. And since Holiseo Featheron was a great figure, you can kind of understand why Holiseo's secret house had that benefit. And in the days when Elsa was looking for what activities she could do to help around the house, she arrived at the mansion's garden. This place was taken care of by Dorothea, a girl who would eventually connect with Elsa in her own way, although the sister story she would have with Elsa wouldn't end well. From this chat, we learn that the Featherons are all girls bought by Holiseo, and although they are all sisters, what decides an older sister is not age, but the time they have been in the organization. Dorothea was the younger sister. At least that's how things were until Elsa arrived. Elsa and Dorothea started their relationship on the wrong foot. In fact, Dorothea almost killed her because she felt Elsa was going to steal the activity she dedicated herself to, gardening. If it weren't for Ornea arriving just in time to stop her, Elsa would have died, and we would have been left without the villain of the first arc of ReZero. But the interactions between Elsa and Dorothea improved. In fact, it is said that every girl who passed the cursed doll ritual, which Elsa also passed, had certain after effects on their person. Hildia and Saria, other sisters of Elsa and the organization, depended a lot on physical contact with their twin counterpart. Dorothea had strong emotional instability, and Sithonia simply wasn't someone who enjoyed this type of life. As for Elsa, she remained completely the same. She didn't seem to lose anything, thus implying that she had great compatibility with the curse. That is why Ornea, who was the strongest and even had more skill than Elsa, saw in Elsa an equal and confided to her that she hoped both of them would carry all the work of the organization so that their other sisters could live in peace. Even so, Elsa was still struck by the detail that Dorothea's voice sounded strange. Elsa associated it with some side effect of the cursed doll ritual, but when she would later talk to Dorothea, she confesses to her that, in reality, if her voice sounds strange and doesn't match her appearance, it is because when she was a slave, she drank boiling water to burn her throat so her slave owners would stop asking her to scream in pain. Eventually, Holiseo would arrive, take her out of that life, and give her a dignified life. That is why Dorothea can't help but feel grateful to him, although at the same time she laments not being called on many missions by him. She thought that perhaps she wasn't called because of how distinctive her voice was, but Elsa consoles her and tells her that even if she doesn't have a good voice, she is still someone beautiful and can use her appearance and physical skills to make up for the rest. She adds that if her voice is very distinctive, it was enough to simply not talk, so her appearance could do the rest. Dorothea was surprised by the good advice her younger sister gave her and told her that she no longer hated her. Or at least she no longer thought she was an idiot. It is said by Ornea that in the following days, Dorothea was in a better mood, and even her father had called her again to assign her a mission. Before leaving to carry out the order, she thanked Elsa for the advice, and it seems she hoped to return soon to continue talking to her. So you can imagine her surprise when, upon returning from the mission, Dorothea finds out that Elsa murdered Holiseo. In fact, it is said that that day Holiseo sent everyone on a mission and the only one he left at home doing nothing was Elsa. So just think for a moment about everyone's surprise upon returning and finding their father dead. This ended in a spectacular scene where Elsa basically has to confront her sisters for her most recent crime, the crime of killing Holiseo. And it went like this.
Deep within the divine chapel, Dorothea was kneeling before the altar, desperately clinging to something. Leaning against the altar, his body torn apart and his life fluids spilled across the floor, lay Holosio, whose last breath had faded long ago. Holosio Featherrun had died there in a merciless way. Through her sobs, Dorothea held tightly to his remains, without paying the slightest attention to the blood staining her clothes. But no matter how desperately she cried out, there was no trace of will left in her father's lifeless body. To anyone who looked at him, it was obvious that Holosio was completely dead. If it had been the body of a Featherrun sister, there might have been some chance of bringing them back. But Ornia stepped forward and, instead of the motionless Sithonia, bitterly explained that their father was not a cursed doll, but merely a doll craftsman. Receiving that embrace and hearing those harsh words made Dorothea's throat tighten. Once again, faced with the terrible sight before her, she lowered her gaze to her own hands. The same hands that, with heartbreaking sincerity, had tried to put back inside her father's body everything that had spilled out. Holding hands, the twins Saria and Hildia leaned against each other and voiced the natural question of what could have happened at the mansion while they and Dorothea had been away. They wondered how Holosio had ended up caught in such a tragedy and what the true source of their sister's grief was. After calming her sobs, Dorothea declared that there was only one possible explanation. Despite Ornia's attempts to stop her, Dorothea suddenly stood up, pulling away from her and beginning to walk forward with her blood-stained dress. Overwhelmed by that threatening attitude, Sithonia stepped aside, and Dorothea headed back toward the mansion without the slightest hesitation. With eyes burning with hatred, she made her way toward a specific room, whose location was well known to every sister living on the estate. Kicking the door open, as if trying to tear it from its hinges, Dorothea looked inside with deep resentment. Her beautiful features were stained by malice, and her gaze passed over both the bed and Elsa, who was slowly rising from where she had been resting. Elsa casually asked if Dorothea had already returned from her mission, adding that she was surprised to see her show up without even changing clothes. She seemed to have mistaken the blood covering Dorothea as proof that her mission had been completed, but Dorothea did not care about that detail. Moments later, the sisters who had stayed behind caught up to them, left breathless by the sight of the confrontation inside the room. While Sithonia grabbed the imposing Dorothea by the shoulders from behind, she shouted for both of them to calm down. Elsa coldly replied that the atmosphere certainly felt tense and heavy, and assured them that she had every intention of staying calm. However, before Sithonia could finish scolding her for such unnecessary comments, the sharp blades of Dorothea's giant pruning shears swung upward, cutting off Sithonia's arm just below the shoulder as she tried to restrain her. Faced with that sudden burst of violence, Sithonia stared in confusion at her severed arm, unable to understand what had happened. A moment later, as blood sprayed out and covered her cheek, Dorothea coldly muttered for her to get out of the way. Sithonia's body shook violently as she collapsed backward, while Ornia rushed forward to catch her, watching as the pale arm rolled across the floor like a discarded doll part. As Sithonia screamed from the pain that was finally reaching her, Ornia shouted at Dorothea, grabbed the severed arm, and immediately pressed it against the wound, hoping her sister's cursed doll abilities would reconnect it at once. Even so, that was a separate matter. In a conflict that was not training, a younger sister cutting off her older sister's arm was something that should never have happened. Ignoring Ornia's pleas, Dorothea kept her eyes fixed on Elsa, and with her free hand, threw something that clattered across the floor. The moment they saw it, the expressions of everyone except Sithonia changed completely. It was a curved dagger, Elsa's favorite weapon. Dorothea demanded an explanation, asking in a hoarse voice if that was the weapon that had pierced their father's body, while struggling to hold herself back from attacking immediately. Considering that no one else had been at the mansion, that the weapon belonged to Elsa, and that Elsa had never shown much loyalty toward their father, all the evidence pointed to the same conclusion. Even so, Dorothea waited for an answer. Elsa replied with contempt, wondering why that would be the case, and challenging Dorothea to guess if she had any proof. Hearing that familiar answer, Dorothea exploded with rage, and with a scream filled with hatred, swung her shears at Elsa, with the intention of taking her head. Elsa lifted the curved dagger from the floor with her toes, caught it in her hand, and blocked the attack, beginning a clash where the sound of metal shattered the silence. Elsa insisted that she had no intention of fighting her, but Dorothea ignored every word and attacked with each scream, tearing the room apart. The merciless blades destroyed furniture and the bed, while during that deadly dance, Elsa suffered countless deep wounds that cut through flesh, down to the bone. Despite losing blood and narrowly escaping being chopped into pieces, Elsa laughed wildly as she ran across the floor and walls of the room. Even though Dorothea held the advantage, she felt as though her heart was cornered. She tried to strengthen her resolve by thinking about what had been done to her father, but the moment she tightened her grip on the handles of her shears, Elsa interrupted her, saying she should not do that, because it was not good to lie to herself, adding that she was putting far too much force into it. Elsa slipped past the blades and whispered directly into Dorothea's ear, making every hair on her body stand on end, just before tracing a path toward the back of her neck. Ornia stepped in, rejecting that possibility, and with the sharp ringing of metal, her Kusari Fundo shot forward like a snake and slammed into Elsa's temple, sending her flying with tremendous force. Elsa's body crashed through the window and was thrown outside the mansion. Ornea and Dorothea immediately jumped after her, while Sithonia, standing in the ruined room, ordered the motionless twins to chase Elsa down and bring her back alive, warning them that otherwise they would kill her. Although Saria and Hildia questioned whether that would really be so terrible, Sithonia's firm command won out, and the twins reluctantly obeyed before climbing out through the window. Left alone, Sithonia asked the empty air why Elsa had acted this way, receiving no answer as the fight to the death continued outside in the gardens. Dorothea screamed Elsa's name in desperation, and Elsa sarcastically replied that she could hear her perfectly well without her shouting so loudly. At the cry of the old hag, no one could help feeling a deep sense of disgust, an instinctive revulsion toward decline itself. Dorothea's figure, once almost angelic in appearance, now looked like a wicked demon, a goddess of death wielding giant pruning shears. She seemed like a badly drawn picture of good and evil. The battle tore through the garden, destroying the flowers Dorothea had cared for so lovingly, while Elsa avoided fatal injuries and headed toward the entrance of the Holy Land. To block her path, Saria and Hildia stepped in front of her, holding up the hems of their dresses and taking fighting stances while moving their bodies through their Circo Plenilunio. As Elsa approached, the twins synchronized their breathing and unleashed a massive attack. After blocking the strike with her dagger, Elsa jumped backward, only for her legs to become trapped by a chain launched by Ornia. Ornia's fighting style was so fierce that she smashed Elsa's body into a stone wall with tremendous force, causing blood to spray and her insides to spill out. Elsa quickly realized she would never be able to fight back if things continued like this, so she made an immediate decision. Using the dagger in her right hand, she cut off her own trapped right leg, freeing herself at the cost of that sacrifice. Elsa was sent flying toward the forest behind the estate, turning to her backup plan, the water well connected to an underground stream, a place she had never imagined she would actually need to use. Falling onto the gravel, Elsa crawled on all fours like a beast to reach the well, an unexpected move that left her pursuers behind. However, Dorothea caught up to her just before she arrived and drove the giant pruning shears through her torso, pinning her to the ground. At that moment, Elsa violently twisted her body, allowing the blades to tear through her and separate the upper half of her body from the lower half. Even Dorothea was shocked by such behavior, and Elsa used that moment of hesitation to swing her curved dagger and cleanly cut off Dorothea's head. The conflict ended with both sisters dealing what should have been fatal blows. Elsa dropped into the well, while Dorothea's severed head wore a look of anguish. A second later, Ornia and the twins arrived in the rear garden. Upon seeing Dorothea's body, Ornia picked up the severed head and pressed it against the wound on her neck, using the healing abilities of a cursed doll to seal it back together. Dorothea drew breath once more, and while coughing up blood, Ornia ordered her to rest and focused on the well. The twins confirmed there was no sign of Elsa, causing Ornia to grit her teeth, because they did not know whether the ability to function as nothing more than a head was the ultimate limit of a cursed doll's powers, or if Elsa would finally die because she had no way to move forward without the lower half of her body. Ornia and the others rushed into the underground waterway, and when they reached the bottom of the well, they understood what had happened. Elsa was nowhere to be found. All they discovered were traces of blood and flesh scattered around a narrow water passage, so small that no human body could have passed through it. Elsa had made herself smaller to escape, most likely reducing herself to nothing but her head in order to pass through that route. Ornia praised her mental strength and willingness to do absolutely anything to survive, but she felt she had failed Sithonia's order. Finally, she commanded the hounds to be released and sent after her, while Dorothea, clenching her crushed teeth, muttered that she would do it for their father. In the name of the Feather-Run sisters, the younger sister who had escaped had to be killed.
It goes without saying that Elsa's relationship with her sisters was broken, and eventually, Elsa would have to take care of them one by one. But curiously, the first one she would face would be Dorothea. I should clarify that there are many more things that happened before this. Things like what Elsa did after the fight against all her sisters, which I cover briefly here. But in short, it is said that Elsa returns to Oliver's shop so he can sell her again. Oliver complains and protests about her, but he still agrees to do it. Unfortunately, by those days, Oliver was already having problems because he gave shelter and refuge to a slave who was mistreated by her captor. This slave was named Tatiana, and she would soon have an impact on Elsa's life. Because Oliver had problems, Elsa decided that it was better to make a plan and take care of the enemies of both, her sisters and Tatiana's pursuers. So, after killing the noble who was obsessed with Tatiana, Elsa waited in his mansion, and she did so knowing that one of her sisters would come to take care of erasing that noble with a questionable history. And that is how Dorothea ended up arriving at the mansion, and things happened the following way. The stage for that meeting was meticulously set in the private residence of Hakon Lexent, an environment surrounded by bookshelves packed with books that the lord of the mansion had never shown a genuine interest in. The House of Lexent, which in the past was responsible for the records of the Holy King Church, had seen its duties reduced to a mere formality, a legacy that Hakon was totally indifferent to. Elsa, knowing about this decline and the man's loose lifestyle, did not hesitate to use the mansion as the theater for their reunion, knowing that if she managed to project a troublesome enough image for the Gustakan Church, the Fitherun sisters would inevitably be deployed. When the long-awaited meeting finally happened, Dorothea fixed her gaze on Elsa's face and, with a raspy voice that felt nostalgic to Elsa, let out a question loaded with confusion about the reasons for that deployment. Elsa tilted her head gently, processing the vagueness of that question, and answered that she had simply looked for the fastest way to start a chat with them. She explained that after her desperate escape in the past, she didn't know the location of the mansion, and since it was impossible to contact them through normal means, she had chosen that indirect method, asking her sister if such a reveal surprised her. Since the location of the Holy Land where the sisters lived was an absolute secret that not even Oliver's contacts had been able to figure out, Elsa had given up on looking for them at their home, preferring to force their appearance on the battlefield. Dorothea remained silent, but the fury shaking in her eyes was not the result of hesitation, but of a deep hatred. After a hateful shout that pronounced her sister's name, Elsa asked her with apparent innocence if she had missed her. Without any provocation, Dorothea lunged at her with a low stance, drawing two long glaives from her blue dress that, when joined together, transformed into huge pruning shears. Elsa knew the edge of that weapon well, capable of severing flesh and bone with ease. While Dorothea charged with clear killing intent, Elsa jumped from the desk and, landing lightly, returned the feeling by assuring her that she had missed her too. At that instant, the library floor, previously sabotaged by Elsa, caved in with a loud crash. Elsa confessed that her preparations had been thorough, while Dorothea, caught in the shock and helplessness of the fall, lost her balance. Elsa took advantage of the falling bookshelves as stepping stones to get close to her sister, who, frozen by surprise, couldn't react in time. Elsa delivered a hard kick to her torso with the tips of her feet, sending Dorothea flying into a waterfall of books. Upon standing up after cutting through the debris with her shears, Dorothea accused Elsa of planning to kill her the same way she finished off their father. Elsa, emerging from the piles of books, pointed out that this was a misunderstanding and suggested that it would be best for both of them to drop the fight, explaining that she only wanted to talk. Dorothea bitterly questioned her making such a proposal after setting an ambush for her, to which Elsa replied that it would have been rude to welcome her without the proper preparations, especially knowing that the meeting would turn into a battle to the death. Even though Elsa insisted she had no intention of fighting, Dorothea glared at her with renewed anger. When Elsa repeated her desire for a ceasefire, mentioning that she didn't want things to end violently now that they had found her, Dorothea exploded in outrage, reminding her that Elsa had killed the only person who had ever valued her in this world. Regretting that dialogue was impossible, Elsa shrugged her shoulders. Dorothea, declaring that she no longer considered her sister, lunged to the attack again with the frantic speed of a cursed doll, showing an absolute willingness to let her own body be torn apart just to get Holoseo's approval. Elsa stated with an almost whisper-like voice that Dorothea could never compare to Ornia or the other sisters. At that moment, the charge stopped dead. Dorothea had lost her balance because her torso had been cleanly sliced in half. Without realizing it, she had thrown herself against a steel wire that Elsa had strategically tightened at that exact height. Elsa explained that unlike her or Ornia, Dorothea's healing ability was too weak to survive a crosswise cut to the abdomen. While Dorothea writhed among her own internal organs, Elsa insisted that a reception without preparations would have been a lack of respect. When she tried to finish her off, Elsa stepped on her arm to block her last attack with the shears. Despite the agony, Elsa assured her that she wasn't acting out of hatred, but that she even felt proud of her sister's achievements and sincerely regretted that things had reached that extreme. However, Dorothea's crying turned into a cold laugh. Elsa noticed an unnatural change in the lower part of her sister's body, which began to move with a terrifying purpose. Suddenly, Dorothea's blood transformed into sharp blades that burst against Elsa's skin, shredding her right arm and leg. Dorothea, having reconnected her body by controlling her own blood, stomped on Elsa's face with the heel of her shoe. Between laughs that sounded like curses, Dorothea explained that her rage had granted her that new power to bind things together. Straight after, Dorothea cut her own wrist to pour a massive amount of blood over Elsa's abdomen. Instead of making her explode, she ordered the blood to invade her sister's inside, creating the hellish feeling of a crowd of insects with blades eating her up from within. Elsa screamed in indescribable agony while Dorothea celebrated her torment, urging her to suffer for what she did to their father. Despite the internal violation of her body, Elsa managed to strike Dorothea's skull with her legs, freeing herself and fleeing toward the dining room. Dorothea chased her fiercely, destroying the wires and iron stakes Elsa had left behind as backup traps along the way. Upon entering the dining room, she found Elsa blocking the only exit. Elsa admitted she had gotten used to the pain and saw no point in continuing to run away. When Dorothea launched a new offensive of blood, Elsa dodged the attacks until a loud inferno wrapped around the room. Elsa threw herself through the flames, ignoring her own burns, and tackled Dorothea. Covering both of them in a high-proof liquor that soaked the place, Elsa proposed a final test of endurance. Before Dorothea could protest, Elsa set fire to the alcohol. The flames consumed their clothes, skin, and hair in an unbearable burst of heat. Dorothea's blood, no matter how powerful it was, couldn't withstand the burning and lost its strength. While Dorothea turned to ash and her internal organs melted away, she could hear Elsa's hysterical laughter right above her. In the middle of that torture, Dorothea understood that Elsa was hopelessly crazy. In a last act of grit, she plunged her hand into her sister's abdomen to fire a blood bullet directly at her heart. However, Elsa, with her face melted away, revealing her skull, flashed her usual wicked smile. With an extraordinary move, Elsa sliced open her own torso to let the flames consume the blood bullet before it reached its target. While delighting in the pain of her own burned insides, Elsa declared that the sibling fight was over, shaking with a dark excitement as the fire finished consuming what was left of them both. After the fight against Dorothea, Elsa is helped by Oliver to get out of there and hide again. Shortly after, the other Feather-Run sisters investigate the scene and deduce that Elsa is behind it all, although Ornea doesn't believe it because, well, she doesn't think Elsa is that smart. Even so, Hildia and Saria ask for permission to take care of their foolish younger sister, and not only that, they request to take all the hunting hounds from the mansion, and incidentally, they ask for a favor from Holisio. How do they ask for a favor from Holisio if he was supposed to be dead already? Well, it's simple. It turns out that Sithonia had the ability to transform into a person of her choosing, so she had been impersonating their deceased father in important meetings before the general public. What the twins asked for under their father Holosio's authority was official permission to devastate the entire city under the excuse of heresy against the Gustekian Church. Afterward, knowing the city where their former younger sister would be, both launched a large-scale attack where they unleashed several hounds to attack the streets. At the same time, Elsa was walking with Tatiana. And then the following happened. In the middle of a snow-covered plaza filled with blood and screams, Elsa turned her gaze and tilted her head toward the top of the clock tower. There at the top of the building, whose magical crystals displayed the time from afar, two figures stood holding hands. Saria and Hildia, twin sisters as alike as two drops of water, rubbed their cheeks together with cruel smiles as they remarked that Elsa had not changed at all, confirming with merciless grins that their sister was still exactly the same as always. Elsa watched her unchanged behavior, the same expressions and the same dresses that made them look identical, and let out a brief sigh before pointing out that they did not seem to have changed either. However, the twins played with the idea that perhaps they had changed after all, arguing with each other over whether Elsa's appearance was hiding some kind of inner transformation. When the topic shifted to Elsa's physical development, the twins rejected the idea in unison and pointed with their joined hands toward Tatiana, who was watching the scene with her shoulders drawn in. Saria and Hildia expressed enormous surprise, almost as if they were witnessing the strangest thing in the world, upon seeing that Elsa was accompanied by someone, especially after having taken Dorothea's life. Elsa looked surprised because she had never imagined they would come looking for her because of what happened to their other sister, since she had always considered them interested only in themselves. She had even thought that the initial attack from the hounds had simply been a misunderstanding. The twins responded with exaggerated mourning for the puppies they had carefully raised and that Elsa had killed without hesitation. Aware that she was at a disadvantage because the twins had taken the initiative, Elsa told them to come down from the tower and stop sending dogs after her so the number of corpses would not keep growing. Pretending to be offended by her boldness, Saria and Hildea announced that they would introduce her to their most precious puppy. Speaking in perfect unison, they summoned a creature whose double malicious roar shook the entire city of Inorandum. It was Orcos, a gigantic two-headed demon dog that burst into the plaza, covering Elsa and Tatiana with its enormous shadow and dripping saliva. Bathed in the sound of that roar, Elsa felt her dress and hair being thrown into disarray, but instead of fear, she felt excitement and called the sight wonderful. While Tatiana reacted nervously and pulled on Elsa's arm, Elsa admitted to her sisters that she had no idea they owned such a pet. The twins joked about how secretive they had always been, and Elsa accepted the surprise with delight before the witch beast finally moved into action. Orcos, over 5 meters long and strong enough to crush a human into dust, swung one of its massive paws. Elsa barely avoided the attack while dragging Tatiana along with her as she jumped backward. Elsa danced around the demon dog's double attacks, avoiding fangs that tore through the air while snow continued to fall upon the dying people scattered throughout the plaza. However, the battle became more difficult when Saria and Hildea descended from the tower while spinning their specialized weapon, the full moon circus. Elsa used a corpse as an improvised shield, but the twins' attack sliced through the body instantly, forcing her to take shelter in a deadly space between Orcos' fangs and the edge of the sword. Wounded in the shoulder and waist, and losing a considerable amount of blood, Elsa received Tatiana's silent criticism for looking so pathetic. Elsa admitted that carrying the girl's weight around was inconvenient, but refused to abandon her because she feared Oliver's reaction. The twins mocked her apparent weakness and revealed their trump card. They pointed toward the clock tower, where Oliver hung battered and barely breathing, suspended by thin wires after being tortured. Tatiana desperately begged Elsa to save him. Elsa reflected on how strange it was for a slave to try so hard to save the person who enslaved them, but admitted that Oliver was an irreplaceable eccentric who needed to be rescued. During that distraction, Orcos tore off her right arm. Even though Elsa possessed incredible regeneration, the shock of losing it and the discomfort of being mutilated briefly overwhelmed her. She reacted instinctively, using the exposed bone in her arm to stab one of the monster's eyes, then delivered a kick so savage that it shattered her own shoe and crushed the bones in the beast's throat. Lost in a state of ecstasy brought on by pain and battle, Elsa was interrupted by the twins, who cut one of the wires supporting Oliver, increasing the strain on his remaining fingers and causing him to scream in agony. Unable to carry Tatiana with only one arm, Elsa set her down and firmly grabbed her hand, lamenting the irony of joining hands with her at the exact moment the situation had become most dangerous. Saria and Hildea continued cutting wires and mocking Oliver's suffering, explaining that their goal was not only to punish him for helping Elsa, but also to turn him into a poison that would force her to obey them. Orcos struck Elsa and sent her flying through the air, something she interpreted as a necessary step toward freeing her soul at the edge of death. However, when she found herself cornered in front of the witch beast's jaws, there was a fatal delay in her ability to react. At that moment, Tatiana, with unexpected determination, pushed Elsa aside and traded places with her. Elsa saw an incomprehensible calmness on the girl's face before she vanished between Orcos' teeth. The sight of Tatiana's remains changed something deep inside Elsa. With a strength that transcended reason, she obliterated one of the demonic dog's heads, the one that had not devoured Tatiana and was now proceeding to attack her, destroying it with a devastating kick. Although the other head was still alive, Elsa promised it a painful death, driven by a hatred she had never felt before during any of her killings. In a display of pure strength, she grabbed one of the witch beast's legs with her newly regenerated arms and hurled it toward the twins. Saria and Hildea were stunned as Elsa captured Hildea and smashed her into a wall. With terrifying coldness, Elsa began methodically destroying every joint in Hildea's body, reminding Saria that she could continue living even if Oliver died, then asking whether Saria could endure losing her own twin. Elsa entered a state of complete destruction, similar to the one her sister Ornea possessed, where she could predict every movement of her enemies. After torturing Hildea, Elsa threw her aside like a bloodied sack. Saria ran to embrace her ruined sister, crying over the loss of the appearance they once shared. Elsa took advantage of the opportunity to recover the full moon circus and, using monstrous physical strength, hurled the gigantic sword at them. The weapon sliced both sisters in half while they remained locked in each other's embrace. Separated and dying, the twins tried to crawl back toward one another on the ground while Orcos, recognizing Elsa's superiority, showed complete submission to her. Elsa patted the monster and ordered it to devour Hildea first. As the younger sister was crushed between its jaws, Elsa reflected on her own emotions, feeling a strange sense of relief despite not truly hating either of them. Saria, crying over the loss of her other half, swore she would kill Elsa, but Elsa responded with indifference before allowing Orcos to devour the older sister as well. The plaza fell silent beneath the sound of one final bite, bringing the purification operation to an end in a scene of absolute misery. After the fight, Ornea would appear, and Elsa thought it was her end, but Ornea seemed to have many doubts about certain things that I will explain soon. When Elsa saw her, she thought about attacking her by taking advantage of this new power she obtained while pushing herself to the limit in her duel against the twins. but just taking one look at Ornea was enough to know she would never beat her. After all, Ornea had already unlocked that power a long time ago. When her sister arrived, she just killed the dog and took the twins' remains. Elsa tried to ask for Tatiana's remains to hold a wake for her, but Ornea told her she was in no position to make demands. And just as she was about to kill Oliver for having allied against a church target, Oliver points out how strange the situation is, how Holiseo, being as smart as he is, could have died at the hands of one of his own creations. Then Ornea asks Elsa to be honest with her about what happened that night. The night Holiseo died when all the sisters were out on a mission and only Elsa stayed home. Elsa reveals to her that, in reality, their father himself asked her to kill him. Faced with Ornea's doubt, Oliver counters and questions the possibility that if Holiseo ordered Elsa to do this, he must have had a way to make sure they all fought to the death. In other words, he told her that someone has been hiding information. He wasn't too far from the truth because, realizing something, Ornea quickly leaves the scene, and she left in such a hurry that she didn't even take the twins' remains that she said she came to get. It was left to Elsa and Oliver to bury the fallen. Afterward, Ornea would go to talk to Sithonia because she wanted to share what she had just discovered. But what Ornea didn't know is that this would be the last time she would speak with Elsa, because the following would happen.
Moving with quick steps through the family mansion, Ornea burst into Sithonia's room, knocking the door open as if she wanted to tear it down. That space, which was always right at the heart of Holiseo's office, was crammed with confidential documents that were never allowed outside. Sithonia quietly closed the book she was reading, and after fixing her red eyes on the newcomer, she gave a brief reply to her greeting. Meeting that look, Ornea confirmed that she was back, and informed her that both Saria and Hildia were dead. Sithonia nodded, mentioning that she had received a report about the failure of the purification operation, though she admitted she had no idea that Ornea had headed to Inarandum, the city where it all happened, so she questioned her reasons for acting on her own. Ornea explained that her intention was to give support to her sisters, to which Sithonia replied that since both of them had died, it was clear she didn't just arrive late, but that Ornea had intentionally let them die. Sithonia, however, refused to accept that idea and walked up to Ornea, brushing her hair with a mix of coldness and affection, pointing out that the real reason was her inability to choose between supporting Saria and Hildia or Elsa. Ornea felt her shoulders tremble facing that truth because she had no excuses. Although she could have stepped in at any moment, her indecision allowed the fight to the death to play out to its very end. Sithonia concluded that after the deaths of Saria, Hildia, and Dorothea, only the two of them were left from the original Featherrun sisters. When Ornea questioned what would happen if their original assumption about the events was wrong, Sithonia looked at her with curiosity. Ornea then revealed that she had spoken with Elsa, who assured her that she killed their father because he himself ordered her to do it, arguing that they had misunderstood everything from the start. According to what she told Sithonia, Holiseo had some hidden goal, and since Elsa wasn't good at explaining things, they had kicked her out of the group. Sithonia severely questioned if Ornea was really saying that she wanted to forgive Elsa after the crimes she caused, at which point Ornea went quiet, unable to answer, as her sister took her hands off her face. Sithonia took a step back and pulled a single document out from the pile of papers, heavily muttering the name of the Witch of Envy. That mention sowed confusion and disgust in Ornea, because for anyone living in that world, including their clan, it was a vile and feared name. Sithonia began to explain a little-known story, detailing how the Witch of Envy had murdered other witches in the past to steal their powers and become an unrivaled being. When Ornea interrupted her, questioning the relevance of that story to them, Sithonia, holding the document tightly against her chest, asked her if she knew the root of the cursed dolls. Ornea answered with what she knew about using curse arts to block one's own death by stopping the target from dying. Sithonia nodded, confirming that cursed dolls cannot pass away without eliminating their designated opponent. Ornea tried to reason that, if that were the case, their sisters should have survived given their regeneration abilities, but Sithonia coldly explained that, in reality, they traded their lives with the opponent they were supposed to kill. Sithonia then referred to Holiseo by his name, revealing that he had tried to replicate the phenomenon of the Witch of Envy, who became powerful by devouring other witches. Noticing Ornea's unease at the document, Ornea demanded that she show it to her, to which Sithonia responded by revealing that the Featherrun techniques were a remnant of the heresy of ancient witches that someone yearned to possess. After identifying that person as their own wretched mother, Ornea jumped to her feet, transformed by hatred toward her sister's betrayal. However, when Ornea tried to attack her with her chain weapon, she discovered with horror that her own arms and legs were immobilized, trapped by the weapon, without her even giving the order. Sithonia, with a soft but steady gaze, knelt beside her and finally showed her the content of the document, confirming that it was a note note left by Holusio. Although the paper contained mind-blowing information, what truly horrified Ornia was realizing that Sithonia knew it existed and had kept it hidden just to encourage discord among all the sisters. Sithonia assured her that despite everything, she felt gratitude for her, for the rest of their sisters, and for Holusio himself, but confessed that the time for watching over their dreams was over. Before leaving her there, trapped in helplessness and anger, Sithonia sincerely confessed that, deep down, she deeply envied her for being able to stay a little girl without knowing anything about the terrible reality surrounding them.
As we can see, something happened to Ornia, something Sithonia did before the story cut off. I don't blame you if the text didn't make it clear to you, but it's something that will soon have its answer, specifically in Ornia's fight against Elsa. It is said that right after Elsa finished receiving medical treatment, the strongest sister would appear to take care of her, and it went like this.
As soon as her ears caught a slight metallic sound, Elsa carried Oliver's body without hesitating. Strictly applying the lessons learned from their last encounter, she made sure not to make any mistakes. She remembered with bitterness how her carelessness while walking unarmed with Tatiana in the city had led to disastrous results. Elsa reflected to herself that if she had kept that careless attitude, this time she would have been wiped out without a doubt, convinced that her next opponent would not forgive the slightest mistake. Because of that, for the first time in her life, she threw away every last bit of overconfidence. Oliver yelled, asking her to wait, when she suddenly picked him up, but Elsa didn't show the least bit of concern. Lifting one of her long legs, she kicked the window of the dragon carriage and jumped outside while protecting him in her arms. Almost at the exact same moment, a metallic crash pulverized the public transport, turning the driver, the land dragons, and the rest of the passengers into a mix of flesh and blood, impossible to tell apart. The tool behind such a destructive feat was a silver chain that twisted like a snake, Ornia Featherrun's kusarigama. Ornia's small silhouette stood over the remains of the disaster, wrapped in an emerald dress that matched her green hair. Oliver, with his fingers recently reattached and wrapped in bandages, muttered with resignation that the girl had finally arrived. It was an ambush on the way back from her medical treatment. Elsa guessed that if Ornia suspected her escape, she wouldn't have let them hide without putting up a fight. After building up her energy by eating over the last few days, Elsa's body had recovered its shape and her wounds were healed, leaving the playing field level. Elsa ordered Oliver to get out of the way so he wouldn't mess up the fight, warning him that it would be troublesome if he ended up with the same fate as Tatiana. Oliver tried to scratch his head in frustration, but his lack of fingers stopped him, so he simply shook his hair, and as he backed away, he shouted at her with his merchant soul that she better not die before he could sell her. Elsa admitted to herself that she didn't dislike that intensity, and without looking at him, she faced Ornea at a distance of 10 meters, which, for two fighters of their level, was basically nothing. Elsa was curious about Ornea's change in attitude, asking her if she had abandoned her ideology of not involving innocents, since she had destroyed a whole carriage just to reach them. She also pointed out that she remembered Ornea as someone more talkative, but her sister didn't answer with words. Instead, the weight of the kusarigama flew right past Elsa's cheek, with enough force to burst a skull like a piece of fruit, and making the snowy path explode behind her. With that impact as the start, both dove into a fight to the death. Elsa ran through the snow with the speed of an arrow, wielding the curved dagger she had designed specifically for this match, after being almost killed by Ornea multiple times in the mansion's basement. She firmly declared that with that weapon, she would rip out her heart, but Ornea simply blocked the blow with her own arm, letting Elsa slice it off from the elbow down. Despite the blood, Ornea didn't stop. Her inability to feel pain made her the strongest rival, allowing her to slaughter with the same calmness one uses when playing with dolls. When Elsa tried to slit her throat, Ornea deliberately broke her own ankles and knees to lower her center of gravity and dodge the blade, snapping her bones back into place instantly to go on the attack. One of Ornea's fists smashed into Elsa's knee, breaking both bones at the same time in a burst of mutual destruction. Neither showed any concern for the safety of their bodies, crossing mortal limits in a sacrilege to life where everything damaged, arms, legs, eyes, or throats, would grow back sooner or later. In the middle of that murderous game, Elsa had longed for so much. She let out a laugh that echoed along the snowy path. Both slammed shoulders, and Elsa managed to pierce Ornea's throat with her weapon, while Ornea wrapped her chain around Elsa's neck and pulled until it broke. After a second of unconsciousness, needed for their bodies to fix the brain and bone damage, Elsa recovered first. While Ornea spit blood as she pulled out the dagger, Elsa drove the blade into her forehead, scrambling her brain until her sister's eyes lost focus, and blood gushed from her ears and nose. Possessed by a destructive frenzy, Elsa began to tear Ornea's body body apart with her bare hands, ripping open her wounds and skinning her like a fish. Ornea tried to resist by striking Elsa's face with her knees, but she was knocked down into the snow. Elsa mounted her and began to slam the kusarigama against Ornea's skull over and over, pulverizing her without rest. Oliver finally stepped in, holding Elsa from behind and desperately screaming at her that it was enough. He was covered in blood himself, his clothes a mess after being repeatedly thrown away by Elsa in her earlier attempts to stop her. Coming to her senses, Elsa looked at the remains of what was once Ornea, now reduced to an inert, crushed mass. Oliver, holding onto her arms, asked her if she had finally calmed down, showing his undone bandages and his hand that was still missing 3 fingers. Elsa looked at the unrecognizable corpse and smiled with melancholy, realizing that she hadn't defeated the real Ornea. That figure was already an empty shell when the ambush started, a soulless being that could have never been her sister. She concluded, with grim clarity, that now the only ones left standing were herself and Sithonia.
It is not known how much time passed, but it was probably weeks or months, during which Elsa, with Oliver's help, once again located the mansion where she used to live with her sisters. Honestly, Elsa's return to the mansion is a moving moment, because we see how she stands there, looking at the places she used to hang out with her sisters. It is said that it makes her sad to see the place so neglected, when her sisters used to take care of it with such dedication. It saddens her to see Dorothea's garden overgrown. It saddens her that Hildia and Saria's kennel is empty, and it hurt to walk through the empty dining room that the gluttonous Ornea used to frequent. It is said that it caught her attention how the remaining sister hadn't even changed the water in the flower vases. She thought about all of this as she went down into the basement, expecting to run into the remaining sister, and so she did.
Just when the situation seemed to have calmed down after Ornea's fall, a quiet voice announced Sithonia's presence, who appeared wearing an elegant red dress. Her unmoving stance overlapped clearly with the memories Elsa kept of her. She embodied a figure that combined Dorothea's malice, Saria, and Hildia's traps, and that ability to return from the dead characteristic of Ornea, though without completely fitting any of those individual traits, perfectly personifying the essence of Sithonia. Elsa commented that she expected her sister to have made many more preparations to welcome her. Sithonia calmly replied that, indeed, she had considered it, but concluded that any trap would have been useless after she had been capable of wiping out Ornea, a reasoning that even she was able to understand. Elsa coldly requested that she not refer to Ornea in that way, a rare display of emotion that caused Sithonia to slightly raise her eyebrows in surprise, admitting she didn't think her sister was capable of harboring sibling feelings. Elsa clarified that, indeed, she felt both affection and pity for Ornea and demanded to know what she had done to break her mind, questioning how she had managed to bring her to such a state. Faced with the question, Sithonia looked down sadly, remembering the conclusion Elsa reached after her deadly fight. For in fact, Ornea's shattered mind had been the key that allowed Elsa to get an overwhelming victory on that snowy field. Elsa, with determination, stated that if she had fought the real Ornea under normal conditions, her chances of survival would have been minimal, but that she would have never let herself be defeated by the weakened version she faced. Sithonia then asked her if her intention in killing her was to achieve completion as a cursed doll, a statement that took Elsa by surprise, causing her to narrow her eyes at that idea, while Sithonia broke into a terribly dry smile, completely unlike her usual personality. Sithonia asked her not to try to trick her, assuring that she was aware of the completion ritual for the cursed dolls that her father had set in motion that night. With a painful smile and clutching her chest, Sithonia blamed Elsa for the situation, mentioning that she had come to Featherrun with the purpose of acquiring that secret art, though she admitted that the days spent there had been a great comfort. Elsa reasoned that Sithonia wanted the completion of the ritual, which was why she had successively sent Dorothea, Saria, and Hildia, and had shattered Ornea's mind. Sithonia nodded, and when asked if the idea of being a complete cursed doll was so tempting to her, she bit her lip as violent emotions surfaced on her face, revealing accumulated negative thoughts. Elsa's sharp sense of smell, used to catching other people's emotions as naturally as breathing, immediately detected an unbearable and spreading terror coming from her sister. When Elsa asked what terrified her so much, Sithonia replied with a trembling voice that she feared the most frightening and repulsive being in the world, her own mother, or rather, the monster that called herself that. She explained that she needed that secret art to escape from that monster's control, and at that moment, some shadows responded to her agitation, rushing at Elsa. Elsa reacted quickly, wielding her curved dagger and ripping open the torso of the figure attacking her, but she was surprised to see that the wound closed in the blink of an eye. The figure, taking advantage of her surprise, slammed her against the floor, pinning her down while new killers emerged from the shadows. They were empty-eyed women wrapped in dresses. Remembering the details of the night of the ritual, Elsa understood that these were the failed candidates who had not managed to adapt to become cursed dolls, and who had given up their own identity to live only as subordinates. Sithonia explained that this basement was, in reality, a place to throw away those who failed in the process. Elsa, looking at the broken shells of what must have once been beautiful maidens, thought out loud that they fit the definition of cursed dolls much better than the Featherrun sisters did. Sithonia confirmed that she needed them to get a body that wouldn't die and thus escape from her mother's control. To which Elsa, after taking a deep breath, scolded her, saying that her plan was extremely pitiful because she was copying her father's way of acting while trying to get away from her mother. Sithonia rejected her pity, arguing that Elsa had started everything by killing their father and setting the ritual in motion, leaving her with no other choice but to come out victorious to become a complete cursed doll. Elsa, feeling the failure of trying to reason with her, quietly muttered that there was no point in talking anymore. Sithonia, with a firm tone, ordered her not to move and told her of her intention to kill her, even though she found the process regrettable. Elsa, keeping her cool, reminded her that she doubted she could wipe her out so easily, given her ability to recover, even when reduced to just a head. Sithonia admitted, with a mix of admiration and coldness, that her connection with the curse arts was second to none, but insisted that she could be killed, just like she did with Ornia, saying this while ordering the cursed dolls to prepare their evil weapons for a final blow. Elsa clarified that she didn't dislike pain, but Sithonia, striving to give her younger sister a peaceful farewell, asked her to sleep, while gently placing her fingers on her forehead. With a deep sigh that seemed like a prayer, the wrinkles on Sithonia's forehead relaxed for a moment, as if she had received forgiveness. However, in the next instant, Elsa moved with agility before a completely stunned Sithonia, showing that something had changed in the situation. To escape the grip of the cursed dolls holding her down, Elsa resorted to an extreme move, dislocating her own shoulders to break free from their arms. Although it was an imitation of the movements Ornea used to execute with an icy calm and with no trace of suffering, for Elsa, the experience was very different. A fierce and violent pain tore through her brain, but, far from scaring her, she found it exciting. Turning that torment into pleasure, she popped her arms back into place, and taking advantage of one of her opponents being off balance, smashed her head against the hard rock floor of the basement. Without a shred of doubt, Elsa knelt over her to completely crush the skull and its contents, making sure that the thread of her life was cut for good. Observing that there were only 9 opponents left, Elsa mockingly commented that the value of the Featherrun sisters seemed to have dropped considerably. Sithonia, who was watching the slaughter in complete shock, saw Elsa draw 2 sinister black curved daggers to resume the attack. The rest of the dolls, lacking any will of their own, tried to counterattack after seeing the second one among them get beheaded and the third sliced from her chest down to her abdomen. Despite the ferocity of the dolls' silent onslaught, Elsa noticed that Sithonia was directing their movements from a distance. Her sister's ability to subdue the will of others and force them to obey, in a similar way to what she did with Ornia's broken mind, seemed to Elsa like a scene worthy of admiration. She even praised her, pointing out that she was much better at manipulating puppets than their father ever was. Sithonia responded with a shout full of anger, to which Elsa unhappily replied that there was no need to speak so loudly to be heard. Advancing through the shadows, Elsa kept dismantling her opponents, using her own immortal body as a weapon. She reflected on how inferior these dolls were compared to her former sisters. They lacked Dorothea's powers and her blood control. They didn't possess the trump cards born from the sibling feelings of Saria and Hildea, and they were a massive distance away from the raw strength of Ornea, who alone was much stronger than all these dolls put together. Because of this, Elsa's daggers found no real resistance, inflicting fatal wounds over and over until each doll stopped moving. Sithonia desperately begged her to stop, but Elsa, thrilled by the slaughter, continued mutilating her opponents. She explained that to grant an irreversible death to a cursed doll, it was essential to first smash the skull and then the heart. After executing another one of the dolls by crushing her neck with her heel and kicking away the torso of the next one, Elsa finally locked her eyes on Sithonia. Fear froze Sithonia's face when Elsa said her name. Although she tried to put the last doll in her way, Elsa ripped its heart out with one blow, leaving her alone to face her fate. Declaring that this was the end, Elsa watched as Sithonia fell to her knees, sinking to the floor in pure horror. Although she tried to get up, her fighting spirit was not enough to make her trembling legs obey. After all, Sithonia had never been been a fighter, but a manipulator whose usefulness lay in her unusual abilities. Elsa questioned her about the poison she had mentioned earlier, suspecting she was trying to copy the control their late father used to have over the sisters. Sithonia, catching her breath, pulled an amulet in a pale-colored pouch from her clothes. She explained that the scented stone inside bound the wearer to her blood, letting her shatter their minds, and she was flabbergasted that the object hadn't had an effect on Elsa after months of having it in her possession. Elsa, truly feeling for her, cut off her cracking voice to reveal the truth. She had lost the amulet the very same day she received it, and so she wouldn't make her feel bad. She had been carrying around a piece of cloth that looked like it. Faced with the confession that such a careless mistake had been the deciding factor, Sithonia slumped her shoulders in defeat and sank into a deep silence, resting her forehead against her knees. Elsa asked if Ornia, because of her great love for her sisters, had absorbed a lot of that poison, receiving as an answer that she was, at best, lucky, or simply the worst of them all. Remembering the night she killed Holiseo, Elsa mentioned that he had warned her about a slaughter ritual among sisters to reach the perfection of the cursed doll. Sithonia admitted being aware because of a note he left and confessed to having tried to secure her own victory. Elsa, however, assured that she never had the intention of killing anyone and that she didn't want to become a perfect, flawless being. She revealed that she had always envied other people's humanity and that she wished to be like them, not a perfect doll. She confessed to having killed Holiseo simply because it was hard for her to think of another solution, admitting her act with the naturalness of a child confessing a prank. Sithonia concluded that Elsa couldn't be anything but herself, and admitted, with a radiant aura despite the loneliness of her thoughts, that she was never fit for that power game. Elsa then proposed making peace, but Sithonia asked her for one last favor, to end her life right there. She explained that she wanted to escape her mother's control, and that Elsa, as a cursed doll who killed others of her kind, was her only means of liberation. Resigned, Elsa warned her that she couldn't promise it wouldn't hurt, since she considered herself clumsy with blades. Sithonia smiled with irony, remembering that even trying to teach her housework had been a failure. Before the final blow, Sithonia warned her that by killing her, Elsa would complete the ritual and carry terrible consequences, suggesting that her mother would come looking for her. Elsa, however, calmly replied that everything would be fine, based on the fact that Ornia was still alive and the ritual wouldn't close. At that response, Sithonia stuck out her tongue in a hateful gesture, and Elsa brought her curved dagger down hard.
After this, Elsa would leave the place and have one last chat with Oliver, who tells her that he has already learned his lesson and won't try to sell her again, that losing several fingers is enough for him. Even so, he asks Elsa to wrap up warm because he doesn't want her catching a cold, to which Elsa only asks him to please take care of Ornea. Although Ornia healed from the damage Elsa caused, she couldn't heal her mental state, which Sithonia had previously broken. The poor girl was in the same state Tatiana was in, meaning she couldn't speak and looked like a baby. Elsa says that Ornia seems like a replacement for the other slave, to which Oliver scolds her, but not before asking her where she would head now. It is then that Elsa tells him that, for now, she will go to a place where there is no snow. That would be the last conversation between the two. Unfortunately, not even Elsa was prepared for what was coming.
Did you know that there's a novel that tells us how Elsa and the Archbishop of Las, Capella, first met? I know this might surprise you, but throughout the anime, Elsa and Melia always spoke in code about the existence of an employer named Mother. An employer, who we know from the novels, is Capella. Their first encounter begins just after Elsa leaves the center with a powerful man in Gusteko. She was determined to flee to a warm place where no one would chase her, and she could live peacefully after the events of the Apocalypse Girls novel. However, her plan is interrupted by a voice full of malice that covers the sky.
Before her descends an immense dragon with jet black scales which, far from carrying a divine majesty, behaves like a cheeky, arrogant, and deeply deranged young girl. Elsa, who rarely feels fear at anything, immediately recognizes the nature of this being when she mentions her daughter, the late Sithonia. The dragon mocks Elsa, treating her with absolute contempt while confessing that what she really expected from Sithonia was not power or cursed dolls, but something she called love, a twisted feeling that demanded her daughter's hand over unimaginable treasures in exchange for their very existence. Upon hearing the dragon's confession, Elsa finally understands Sithonia's desperation in trying to murder her own mother to escape that obsessive control. Elsa feels for the first time a pang of pity for the sisters who were consumed by this creature's desire. The dragon, with a wild smile, begins to transform her monstrous body, revealing her true human form, a girl with golden hair and red eyes who has nothing to envy in the cruelty of Elsa herself. This entity confesses that her only purpose in life is to collect the most extreme extraordinary and disturbed children to turn them into her children, offering Elsa a privileged place in her twisted family. When Elsa hesitates about whether to accept or reject this offer, the dragon shifts her gaze toward the sanctuary where Oliver and Ornia are, two people with whom Elsa forged bonds in her novel, making it clear that she will use their lives as hostages to force her to submit once and for all. Elsa, knowing she cannot protect her companions in that state, decides to set aside her pride and kneels before the creature, kissing her hand as a sign of absolute submission. When asked her name, Elsa starts to answer but stops, closing her eyes as she remembers a snowy field and the first time she felt a genuine warmth that made her feel alive. It is at that moment that she decides she will leave behind the name Elsa Featherun and will now be Elsa Granhiert. In this way, Elsa would start working for the Archbishop, and eventually, among her missions, she would meet a peculiar boy who had the same hair color as her, but that is a story you already know. And so the events of Apocalypse Girls would end. After this, the novel would close with the meeting of Elsa and Meili. Although, unlike the version we saw in the anime's 4th season, here Elsa would have some extra lines. Lines where, while pinning Meili down, she adds that the fact that she doesn't speak reminds her of Tatiana. On top of that, it seems like she makes reference to her Featherrun sisters when she tells the wild Meili that now she would be her older sister. The work doesn't state it clearly, but those words about older sisters are a reference to the ranking system the Featherruns had, and of which Elsa was briefly a part. And so, we arrive at a novel that honestly surprises me that very few people know about, because, together with the Apocalypse Girls novel, it is the one with the most lore about Gusteko. Here, they tell us about the Acolyte Knights, who are the equivalent of the Royal Knights of Lugunica, and it goes a bit deeper into the rank of Acolyte Knight, belonging to the Gustekian Church. And it also talks about how orders from the government arrive, and even presents new locations, ones we didn't see during the events of the Apocalypse Girls. Personally, I don't find this novel that interesting, and that is because I feel the author tries to give Elsa some anti-hero attitudes here and there, but doesn't quite manage to convince me completely. You see, in this novel, we see how Elsa temporarily sides with the good guys, and while it is an interesting change, I often end up forgetting this story even exists. So, as I tell you, it's a novel that isn't that memorable for me, but maybe another Elsa fan could give me a different opinion. It is said that this novel takes place 10 years after she started working for Capella, and it is also said that it happens months before Subaru arrives in Lugunica. In fact, it is in this novel where Elsa causes great chaos in Gusteko that makes her go underground, and it is even said that Capella was annoyed with her because of this result. But what did Elsa do that angered Capella? Well, we will discover that little by little. The story starts with an Elsa who has slaughtered a group of guards in a snow camp, and the most interesting thing is that it seems that in these 10 years that passed, Elsa implies that she was away from Gusteko the whole time, and that is due to a comment she makes in this part, where she points out that this place never changes. After defeating the enemies and apologizing to her teammates for taking all the work, they head together to a tavern where she would meet Logris, who had a peculiar reaction to Elsa, and it went like this.
Did you know that even though Elsa is so damn sexy, men will still run away from her? This is revealed in a little-known novel about Elsa that takes place months before episode 1 of the anime.
Everything starts in the freezing kingdom of Gusteko, a place where winter never ends, and faith in the Holy Church is the only way people can endure their miserable existence. Inside a tavern, a group of mercenaries called the Crimson Hunting Squad celebrates their recent victory after a slaughter, mocking the church's teachings while drinking themselves into a stupor. In the middle of this scene of deprivation, a mysterious woman dressed in a fine nightgown enters the bar. It is Elsa Granhiert. Her beauty is so overwhelming that everyone present, blinded by lust and alcohol, is hypnotized by her presence. One of the leaders, Logres, takes advantage of the situation to invite her for a drink, bragging that their employer, Baron Kenash, is footing the bill and that she is the perfect gift for him and his men. He basically thinks Elsa is a woman of the world's oldest profession and that she was sent by his boss to cheer them up. Elsa accepts the invitation with a flirty smile and sits next to Logres, keeping up the act while drinking milk, which is a luxury product in freezing lands. However, the conversation is abruptly interrupted by one of the Baron's subordinates, who demands that Logres report to his lord immediately. However, when the subordinate also asks Elsa to come along, she looks at him with a terrifying intensity, because she just noticed that this man was looking at her with fear. Logres, confused but still excited by her company, asks for her name while trying to touch her, without suspecting that he is courting danger itself. When the woman finally says her name, the atmosphere in the tavern freezes instantly. The Bowel Hunter's reputation is so foul that even these veteran mercenaries, used to extreme violence, lose their words upon realizing they have a legendary monster sitting right next to them. Logres, who just a moment ago was bragging about his power and manhood, completely loses his sex drive after discovering the identity of this mysterious woman. It is said that no man in the squad tried to hit on Elsa after this revelation. Afterward, Elsa would have to complete a mission assigned to her by Capella. However, it didn't go well for her, but that is a story you don't know yet. After that, as soon as Elsa, Logris, and the subordinate leave, they head to the chambers of Baron Igor, a very powerful man in Gusteko who curiously had a fixation on Elsa and wanted to make her his property. Don't be confused by this description. It's not that Igor wanted to make her his wife, but rather he actually wanted to have her as a kind of immortal pet. The most curious thing is that Elsa says she finds that proposal interesting, but she isn't attracted to men with an unhealthy lifestyle. After the rejection of the Baron, he entrusts a task to Logres and Elsa, but what task does he entrust them with? He entrusts them with the task of purifying the land of a villain named Victor who is trafficking humans, and that is a crime the Gustekian Church cannot allow. If you are wondering what they mean by purifying, well, it is an elegant way of saying they should kill him. When they ask Igor why they don't mobilize the church's own forces to deal with a traitor to the church itself, Igor mentions that doing so would take time, and it is likely that the church, in revenge for having failed its teachings, would purge the entire place, and that is why they want to solve this problem without the Gustekian Church finding out. And so, Elsa and Logres set off on their mission. By the way, as an additional curiosity, here in this novel it is made clear at all times that what Elsa was looking for with this was money for her services as a mercenary. I say this in case anyone thinks Capella sent her with some other goal in mind. I'll tell you right now that it wouldn't surprise me if Capella, in her spare time, had her beloved children do this kind of work in order to get some financial capital for her plans. I repeat, this is not something confirmed, it is just something I am assuming. But continuing with the story, in the following days, it is said that Elsa and Logres' forces managed to achieve decisive victories for Igor. The guerrilla plan they used was that while Logres and his men attacked the fortresses head-on, Elsa would infiltrate and take out the enemies one by one from the inside. After having cleared one of the many fortresses they were tasked with, Elsa and Logres would have an interesting chat, one where Logres mentions his concerns to Elsa, telling her how he finds it strange that if Baron Victor is a heartless man who traffics in human lives, why do the people in his territory love him so much and seem to give their lives for him? Generally, with the removal of a tyrant, people would support the move, but this does not seem to be the case. Logres realizes this because his family went through a peculiar situation, and recent battles make him unable to avoid remembering that part of his past. Elsa listened to him patiently while she knitted a stuffed animal that was going to be a gift for Meili. She states that she doesn't care about those kinds of trifles, and that she prefers not to think much about it. It's enough for her to see people's guts to motivate herself and keep knitting in her spare time. Logres only asks her to keep this chat in a corner of her mind. And so, days later, the assault on one of Baron Victor's last fortresses would arrive. Elsa, Logres, and Igor's subordinate would repeat the usual tactic. Logres would attack head-on, Elsa would infiltrate and attack the rear, while Igor's subordinate would just stay in the camp giving orders. Then, after Elsa separates, the following would happen.
Mumbling something inaudible, Elsa stepped away from the group to continue on her own. Without leaving a trace on the snowy path, she looked up at the approaching buildings. The structure, hidden in the middle of the blizzard, was completely visible from the outside, thanks to the light of a crystal lamp. Elsa thought that level of carelessness was extremely strange, since, considering their imminent defeat, she found it surprising how carefree they seemed. She wondered if it was possible that the enemy lacked intelligence or had a very poor understanding of the situation. As soon as she started having those doubts, she heard the faint sound of a battle coming from the direction where she had left the Crimson Hunting Squad, understanding that it was the signal that the fortress guards and Logres had started fighting. Her role was to use that battle as cover, to infiltrate the building and take out the enemy's key points. But as she climbed the back wall looking for a way to slip inside, the back entrance of the building opened and a dragon carriage rushed out at full speed right before her eyes. It was a white dragon with a canopy of the same color that blended into the snow, just like the Crimson Hunting Squad's gear. The carriage's speed didn't slow down. On the contrary, it accelerated to the max, moving away from the battlefield. Elsa noticed that Igor's forces weren't deployed in the direction of the escape, and that Logres, facing the enemy at the front, wouldn't be able to notice the carriage's presence. If Elsa let it pass, that vehicle would escape without any obstacles. She then questioned whether it was worth putting off capturing the enemy territory to follow the carriage, finally deciding she could think about it after catching it. Even if capturing the battlefront was delayed a bit, she figured Logres and the others would be able to hold out, so she chose to follow her intuition, which ordered her to chase the carriage. Normally, it would have been almost impossible for a human to catch up to a fleeing earth dragon on their own. The animal pulling the carriage was from the Aries species, the one best adapted to cold climates, with scales the same color as its white fur, capable of running on the snow by digging in its huge claws to anchor itself. Humans, whose feet would get stuck in the snow, could never catch them, and Elsa, despite running as fast as she could, was no exception. Therefore, she followed a simple plan. If she couldn't catch up to the dragon, she simply wouldn't let it escape. She raised her blade and threw it like a disc, sending it spinning toward the fleeing dragon, cutting cutting its thick neck in two from behind. The Earth Dragon, splashing scarlet blood on the snow, didn't even notice its own death as its head fell. Its huge body collapsed, and the carriage shook violently until it stopped. After hitting her target, Elsa approached the stopped carriage. Just before trying to open the door, she was forced to jump backward as a slash from the inside tore it to pieces. From there, walked out, slowly, a robust man in the prime of his life, with close-cropped grey hair. Despite an old vertical scar running through his left eye, his face, simply adorned with a white moustache, remained stern and refined. Elsa, however, didn't use outward appearance as a standard to judge men, since she believed that what was truly precious lay inside the body. She commented to the man that, in that aspect, he was very much her type. The man replied with a low sigh and, looking sideways at the dead dragon, placed a hand on his silver chestplate, praying for the soul of his mount. Elsa, narrowing her eyes at that elegant gesture, licked her lips and asked him if, because of his prayer and the armor engraved with the mark of the Holy Church, he was an acolyte knight. The man clarified that he was a former acolyte knight, since he had already given up his devotion to the church, and at that moment was just a simple swordsman. While speaking, the man relaxed his hands around his waist, where he carried two thin swords. He grabbed the hilts of both and got into a stance without drawing them. At first glance, it was a strange stance, but there was no doubt that this was how he fought. Elsa called it wonderful, but the man asked her not to make him repeat that he no longer belonged to the church. She insisted that, even if he had quit, he was still an acolyte knight, and asked if he had received a blessing. He questioned her on whether she really believed he would tell her, to which Elsa replied that she was just asking and that she would let his flesh and blood answer the rest of her questions. With a sweet, sickly, blood-red smile on her face, the battle began. Elsa's silhouette cut through the blizzard and the snow, with footwork so agile that she didn't even crush the white blanket, lunging at the man with a strange but impressive stride. With her blade, she grazed the man's neck, lightly cutting his windpipe with the tip of the knife. The human throat should have turned into a musical instrument, producing the beautiful and desperate sound of someone's last moments. However, the acolyte knight remained still, and even though the strike had landed, his deep green eyes remained unchanged, like the surface of a lake without ripples. In an instant, two blades crossed toward Elsa, grazing her forehead as she twisted her body. The scarlet and blue swords belonged to the katanas the man carried, single-edged weapons, originally from the western region of Kararagi, valued for their terrible sharpness. What surprised Elsa was not the existence of the katanas, but the clear skill in the strikes, especially because they were still inside their sheaths. Elsa asked him when he had drawn them, admitting that he had surprised her. The man, clicking his tongue for missing his first attack, seemed surprised that she had been able to avoid it. Elsa, licking the blood dripping from her cut temple, did a backflip to regain her balance. Elsa concluded that the acolyte knights were truly terrifying. The wind from the swords blew violently, and in the snow, what she saw over and over again was death. The scarlet and blue flashes intertwined, creating a realm of death that would cut anyone who touched it. The reach of his swords was more than double that of her knife. So, unable to approach carelessly, Elsa flew quickly around the man, using her combat instincts to look for a way to win. She concentrated on watching the speed of the attacks, delighted with the skill of the man, who maneuvered his swords back into their sheaths after each strike and cut upon drawing them again. She couldn't find a single opening in his movements. Elsa thought that if she took her time, she would have the advantage. Far away, in the original building, the Crimson Hunting Squad and the Orcos domain garrison were still fighting, and Elsa figured Logres and the others would end up winning, which would bring reinforcements to her battle and give her the upper hand. However, that would be a supremely boring ending. Determined to avoid a dull outcome, she decided to stay true to the nature of the Bowel Hunter and forcefully rushed straight into the flash of the swords. The man raised his voice at her decisive and barbaric action, considering it a reckless suicide attack. In Elsa's mind, there was no clear solution, but rather a sense of ecstasy that made her blood boil. With a sharp sound that echoed across the snowy field, the impact tore the knife from Elsa's hand. Nonetheless, she managed to block a magnificent scarlet slash and, after a stride, closed in on the man and met the blue strike with her second knife. By blocking both attacks, Elsa lost her weapons, but she closed the distance until her breath became visible. In the next moment, the two edges plunged forward, driving straight into Elsa's flesh. Blood splattered, and the strikes cut her meat deeply. The impact pierced through her bones with a sharp sound, similar to hitting a frozen rock, until finally, someone let out a sigh. It was a sigh of disappointment, even though the man's lips trembled as he watched the figure in front of him with shock. The man called her an idiot, to which Elsa, smiling, replied that the pain was a sign that she was still alive. The swordsman was left speechless. His attacks had directly hit Elsa, who, instead of collapsing, stood completely still with her arms spread out. The blades had pierced through her palms, wrists, forearms, elbows, and upper arms, stopping only when crashing against her shoulder bones. The man's inability to cut all the way through was because Elsa had moved closer to grab the swords by the hilts. It was a crazy decision, losing so much blood and surely both arms, but she declared it was her victory and that she would let him meet an angel. The swordsman asked what on earth that was while trying to pull his swords back, but Elsa leaned forward faster than he could move. Her lips parted and her white teeth sank into the man's neck, tearing it fatally through the gaps in his armor. Bathed in fresh blood and with carmine splatters covering her face, Elsa spat out the flesh in her mouth, admitting that she had really felt that last move, while letting out a breath of relief in the snowy field upon confirming, at last, the demise of her opponent. Her arms, battered by the swords, were unable to move, but Elsa kept walking on the snow, leaving a bloody trail behind her. She peeked inside the carriage the old man had been trying to protect. Behind the slashed door, shivering from the cold wind, were the occupants. At a voice that came from behind her, Elsa turned slowly. The person approaching, standing next to the carriage, was a young man in warm clothes, with a thin smile on his face. Igor's protege. Elsa narrowed her dark eyes at the young man who had appeared alone, without an escort, on the front line. She reminded him that she thought he wasn't supposed to move from the command base, to which the young man replied that he did indeed plan to do so, but if Victor Orcos moved, the story changed, and he had been deployed there for that purpose. After pausing, the young man looked with disdain at the corpse of the robust man lying in the snow, and commented that he guessed he didn't even have a role to play, praising the Bowel Hunter for being even better than they said. Elsa replied that she wasn't sure she could accept his praise in her current situation, asking him why it was necessary for him to come out when Victor Orcos moved. The young man, keeping his smile, returned the question. At a distance of about 10 meters, with nothing blocking their view or their voices, Elsa noticed that her arms were unmovable, her weapons were out of reach, and her heart was beating loudly in her chest. The man lying on the ground was Victor Orcos, the source of the incident, and a traitor who treated his people like slaves. But Elsa noticed that the children in the carriage were dressed in warm furs and heavy clothes, concluding that that was not the kind of clothing you would put on slaves. When the young man asked her what made her say that, she replied coldly that she spoke from personal experience, since slaves usually wear ragged clothes, wounds from beatings, filthy skin, and dirty hair, making it unnatural that they showed none of that. The young man's face tightened slightly at Elsa's plain answer, who remembered her past. With a fake smile and visibly annoyed, the subordinate scratched his head and told her that, since she was Igor's favorite, he didn't want to hurt her. Elsa retorted that she had no interest in the Baron because he was too fat. At the response, the young man warned her that he wouldn't hesitate and, spreading the palm of his hand toward her, a dazzling flash of white light shot out. It was a hidden life form with supernatural power. Elsa identified the young man as an acolyte knight, contracted with a spirit, right before several beams of destructive energy erupted from that white light, engulfing the immobile Elsa in a bright glare that bathed the entire snowy field.
It is unknown how much time passed, but it is said that shortly after, Elsa wakes up bundled up inside a room. The most curious thing is that the first person to greet her was Victor, the man she was supposed to have killed and about whom she had heard all sorts of bad rumors. They began to chat, and Victor reveals that he didn't die thanks to the power of his blessing. It is worth noting here that a blessing is not the same thing as a divine protection. As far as I remember, a blessing is a type of power or spirit that Ode Glass gives you when you start serving as an acolyte knight. One way or another, this blessing brought Victor back to life right at the moment Elsa was incapacitated by her former ally. It is said that Victor fought him and not only won, but also managed to slash his face. After defeating him, a girl named Nora begged Victor not to kill her, and that is how they ended up taking Elsa with them. Back in the present, Elsa sees the girl and recognizes her. It is said that when she attacked the carriage, it was Nora who stepped in front of the other children to try to defend them. Now, Elsa asks the girl why she saved her, and then the girl tells her how she was saved from dying by Victor in the past, how it hurts her that people accuse him of crimes he didn't commit when he is the person who saved her village, and how she was saved by the teachings of Gusteko. She still wants to keep living under those teachings even when those beliefs are currently against her. After hearing this, and confirming that it was Nora herself who healed all her wounds, Elsa just tells her that surely the colors of her insides must be beautiful. Finally, Victor intervenes and asks her to leave as soon as she can move again. Elsa agrees, but before she recovers completely, she asks for a favor, to be given a needle and thread. As time passed and Elsa was healing, Nora was by her side the whole time and received lessons from Elsa on how to use a needle and thread. Elsa genuinely enjoyed the time she spent with her, since the girl had a talent for this craft. There, Elsa tells her a little bit about what her life was like as a slave and how she never wants to be one again. In a way, Nora understands and comforts her, so Elsa can't help but feel the need to repay her debt. During all this time, it is said that there were men in Victor's service who would enter and leave the building, and they didn't just do it to make sure Elsa wouldn't get violent and attack the girl, but because an imminent war was coming. It was a war that everyone knew they would lose. So after giving Nora a compliment for her skill with needles, Elsa tells her that she isn't very good at understanding the feelings of others, so if there is anything she needs, she can help her. That is how Nora asks her to save her, mentioning how Victor and his men are forced to fight a war they know they cannot win. Elsa only says that she will pay what she owes. After that, we see how Elsa escapes from Victor's mansion, but just when she thought she had gotten away, Victor finds her and gets into a fighting stance. He tells her that if she leaves with the full intention of reuniting with Igor's forces, he won't allow it, but if she has something else in mind, he asks her to tell him. After all, he doesn't want to ignore Nora's good wishes for her. Faced with Victor's honesty, Elsa only says that she will do as she pleases, and that statement of hers was enough for Victor to let her go. Although, before leaving, Elsa asks him to make sure they fight to the death the next time they meet. The funny thing is that upon seeing her leave, Victor mentions that he hopes that arrow doesn't turn against him, and this would be relevant later on. In this way, Elsa would return to Igor's mansion, and then the following would happen.
In a warm hall, Elsa was welcomed by an obese man named Igor Kenash, who, as her employer and leader of the Orcos domain purification operation, gave her a warm smile upon seeing her return. However, noticing the bandages on her arms, his expression became questioning, and he lamented that her beautiful fingers had been ruined. Elsa explained that it had been a battle, and that, when trying to take the lives of others, suffering wounds was inevitable. At this, Igor showed his displeasure at the inefficiency of his subordinate, the acolyte knight named Makarista, instead of worrying about Elsa's condition. Apparently, the clash between the two of them had not been reported to him, which led Elsa to suspect that there might have been a failure in communication, or that Makarista had died at Victor's hands, a possibility that left her disappointed, since she hadn't been able to see the guts of that spirit user yet. Putting her disappointment aside, Elsa inquired about the identity of the two young men standing behind Igor, who looked so much alike they seemed to be twins, and wore bright holy armor engraved with the holy seal, confirming they were members of the acolyte knights. When Elsa suggested that new guards had arrived during her absence, Igor confirmed they were sent from the high-ranking officials as proof that the kingdom considered their role important, adding that, if anything happened to him, the attack on the Orcos domain would fall apart, so Victor Orcos would be forced to try a desperate goal. Elsa commented, in a tone between admiration and sarcasm, that it was quite generous hospitality. At her words, the knights tensed up, but Igor asked them not to get upset, arguing that Elsa's charm was a poison too strong for them, since they couldn't let the sweet scent of debauchery lead them into making mistakes. Elsa, confessing she didn't quite understand those expressions, received a comment from Igor that it was best for a beautiful woman not to be wise, since being loved was enough, and she didn't need to speculate about complex matters. Although the reasoning was irrational, Elsa didn't feel particularly offended, since she believed that people with foolish ideas weren't worth her time. Igor, changing the subject, expressed his joy at her return, and assured her that she shouldn't worry about her wounded arms, since soon she wouldn't need her limbs anymore. Elsa frowned at that ominous comment, and before she could react, the two acolyte knights lunged at her. Moments later, Elsa's vision was cut off by a sharp diagonal flash that sliced through the wind. Only the fact that she had anticipated a surprise attack kept it from being fatal. The knights kept up their offensive with the sound of the wind cut by weapons, which led Elsa to comment that, between the twin whips and the acolytes' combat styles, she always found something interesting. While she prepared herself with a fighting spirit, Igor backed away and stepped off the battlefield. When Elsa asked about the lack of reports regarding the conflict with his subordinate, Igor admitted he knew nothing about it, claiming he only punished suspects, and that his intention was to eliminate the elements that weren't in the previous plan, also confessing that he planned to cut off her limbs to make her his favorite concubine once matters were settled. Elsa, smiling with joy at the revelation of Igor's cruel nature, admitted that for the first time, she found him likable thanks to his twisted hobbies. When Igor offered her to become his favorite in exchange for her limbs, assuring her it wouldn't hurt, Elsa apologized, saying she preferred to prioritize her own hobbies. Instead, she declared she was willing to give love to his insides. Right after, the knights' twin whips engulfed the great hall, destroying marble and carpets, while the thorns on the whips tore through flesh. Elsa, with her arms hanging down, dodged the attacks with elegant movements, moving through the space as if the laws of physics didn't apply to her. Igor, seeing that his instant victory wasn't coming, scolded the knights, causing them to increase the speed and lethality of their whip strikes. Elsa, feeling that the attacks were good, but not enough, jumped toward the ceiling and destroyed a huge crystal lamp. The mass of the lamp fell, forcing the knights to jump away to avoid avoid being crushed. Elsa took advantage of the confusion to catch the whips with her hands, not caring about the pain from the thorns, and tied them to the fallen chandelier, throwing it away to drag one of the knights along with its momentum. After separating the brothers and using one as a human shield against the other's whip strikes, Elsa inflicted similar wounds on them, and finally pulled them toward each other so they would collide. With their torsos lined up, Elsa drew a kukri and, in a single flash, sliced through the twins' armor and bodies, ending their lives in a sea of blood and guts. After confirming the knights' deaths, Elsa examined their remains with fascination, noticing that, even though they were twins, their insides were completely different. Igor, seeing his dead escorts, stammered in terror, but Elsa reminded him that her weapons were fully healed, since she hadn't actually suffered serious wounds under the bandages. When Igor tried to beg for his life, citing his command under the Church of Gusteko, and warning that his death would make her an enemy of the kingdom, Elsa closed her eyes with delight upon hearing such a description. With a smile full of murderous intent, she confirmed to him that that title sounded lovely, which caused Igor to flee in a panic toward the depths of the mansion, screaming for help. Igor ran frantically through the hallways looking for his more than 20 mercenaries, but upon realizing there was no sign of them, he realized how strange the situation was. Suddenly, a voice that sounded like a young maiden's but lacked youth shook his eardrums from above. Looking up toward the voice, his mind reached the limit of its endurance. He was standing in front of a powerful demonic beast with jaws full of sharp fangs, understanding at the last second why the mercenaries hadn't responded. After hearing a final goodbye from the creature, Igor Kanash's life came to an end.
At the same time this was happening, Logres, along with his squad and Makarista, launched the final assault on Victor's fortress. Because Elsa had disappeared, they assumed that Victor was the one who killed her, so they were prepared. After using a war tactic, they managed to start the confrontation by making a large mana stone explode, which blew off one of Victor's legs. Even though he had lost a limb, Victor faced everyone alone and managed to take down half of his rivals, but the weight of his wounds was too much, and when he fell to the ground, he thought that it seemed Elsa hadn't arrived in time. Instantly, Makarista arrives, and he can't help but voice his resentment for the wounds Victor gave him a few days ago, and in the middle of this scolding, Elsa arrives and the following happens.
Just when the situation seemed unbearable, a familiar voice, full of a glamorous tone, broke into the place and stopped everyone present from moving. With light steps, a lonely woman dressed in black and with a long braid of the same color landed in the middle of the Great Hall's devastation. She gave the men who had frozen stiff a terrifying look, lamenting that they hadn't had the chance for a lucky meeting, even though she had gone to a lot of trouble to get ready. Logres, who felt a terrible foreboding upon reuniting with her, watched her as Elsa tilted her head and whispered languidly. The newcomer's gaze passed right by Logres and Makarista to lock onto Victor, who was slowly dying. Victor asked her if she had returned like a stray arrow to finish him off, to which Elsa denied, identifying herself as the Bowel Hunter and stating she had come back because she brought something he wanted. She commented with regret that, if he wanted her to hand it over, she would have preferred they fight for it, since that was her hope. With that comment, Elsa lifted a strange round, black package about the size of an arm, whose shape and size brought about an unpleasant feeling. From Elsa's amused expression, Logres guessed that whatever was wrapped inside was nothing good. She added that both the man and his domains were finished, so that gift was now a waste. Makarista interrupted her talk, demanding she stop being so carefree, while clutching his blood-soaked bandage and glaring at Victor with hatred. Makarista reproached him, asking how he dared show his face before him after having his eyes ripped out, recalling their promise to fight to the death if they met again. Elsa agreed with absolute indifference, although that exchange allowed Logres to understand the origin of the dispute. The scars on Makarista's face had been carved by Victor, and that was probably the reason why Elsa had disappeared during the mission. Makarista, trying to boost his own importance, asked her if she thought she could win by joining that man, whose enemy was the Church of Gusteko and the Holy King himself. Elsa, on the other hand, mocked him, commenting that he was making the exact same mistake as his master. Right after, Elsa untied the knot of the package, which opened and fell to the floor, miserably rolling out the head of Igor Kanash, who had died with his eyes and mouth wide open in horror. Logres, although he suspected what the wrapping contained, couldn't help but cover his face against the macabre reality. The death of Igor, who had been named general by order of the church, was nothing less than an act of direct hostility, as Makarista screamed out. Elsa Granhiert had already become an enemy of the Holy Kingdom of Gusteko. When Makarista lashed out at her, asking if she understood what she had done, Elsa asked him to end that tedious talk. In that moment, a thick smell of death and a demonic atmosphere enveloped her, completely transforming her into the Bowel Hunter. Elsa declared that she acted as she pleased, and that it didn't matter if the enemy was the church or the kingdom, since she had spent a lot of time thinking about it. Logress questioned if she had really thought it through, since the result seemed completely reckless, but she stood by her plan while pointing at Victor, the Crimson Hunting Squad, and the Acolyte Knight. Drawing her kukri, Elsa licked her tongue, and with her black eyes immersed in a dark and wet lust, wondered how she would manage to cut out all their insides. When Logress asked if she also meant them, Elsa replied with an ironic smile that she was sure she would have fun dancing with them. Logress, baffled by that blameless and almost childish smile, felt uneasy, unlike Macarista, who considered talking useless and decided to enforce the death penalty as an Acolyte Knight. Elsa asked him if that meant he would be her opponent, to which he replied that he would make her forget the luck of having survived, and that she would regret not escaping. Enraged, Macarista invoked a pale light that transformed into a blue-scaled snake, a spirit that displayed extraordinary power. Elsa, however, felt that this bright young man, destined to hold the highest positions in the church, was truly someone to be pitied for having crossed her path. Shortly after, Elsa simply observed that if the spirit user died first, his spirit vanished too, right after destroying the heart of Macarista, who let out a final cry before dying. His body was left stabbed in multiple places, especially in the abdomen, a sight so horrifying that even Logress's veteran mercenaries wanted to look away. Elsa, wiping the bloodstain off her kukri, turned to them, asking what they planned to do next. Logress, timidly, told her they had nothing to do, since even though officially they were supposed to fight to the death, they were no longer in the mood for it, especially because those who could order them to act were all dead. Elsa, ironically, asked if they already knew she would take care of that opportunity, to which the mercenaries confirmed that, of course, they were aware. Given the impossibility of fighting in that atmosphere, their killing intent faded away with regret. Logress asked her, with genuine curiosity, how she had managed to do all that in just 4 days. Considering the distance between Igor's mansion and the Orcos domain, Elsa revealed she had borrowed her sister's legs. To Logress's confusion, a huge shadow suddenly emerged from behind her, as if it had stepped out of the darkness. It was a demonic beast, a creature with black fur and 4 legs, a type of beast known as a shadow lion. What surprised Logress even more was the young red-haired girl who rolled off the beast's back, clutching the dying Victor in desperation. Despite her scrapes, the girl begged Victor not to die, but after a final whisper that was inaudible to Logress, the traitor Victor Orcos passed away. Logress, overwhelmed by the chain of events, put his hands to his head at that outcome. Silence took over the room until the young girl broke the quiet and, looking at Elsa with eyes full of bloodlust, asked her why she hadn't saved Victor and the others. Elsa tilted her head with curiosity at the question, realizing that when the girl asked her to save her, she meant for her to save Victor. Confirming her suspicion, Elsa explained honestly that, after saving her, she considered the debt between them settled, and afterward she just made sure to put her own fun first. Yet she still ended up offering an apology without the slightest trace of hesitation. Because her words were so honest, everyone present had no choice but to believe her, since that was the true way Elsa Granhiert thought.
And so, Elsa's story would soon come to an end as she apparently returned to Gusteko. If you're wondering what happened after Elsa realized that the girl had actually asked her to save everyone and she had misunderstood her wish, it is said that the girl grabbed a dagger and tried to end Elsa's life, but she was stopped by Logress's mercenaries. It seems Elsa is satisfied with the result because, by seeing that the girl now hates her, that will make the girl seek to grow up and eventually take revenge against her. And as for Logress, let's just say that Logress manages to convince her not to fight under the excuse that he considered her an ally. So Elsa says goodbye to them, but not before asking him to take care of Nora. Shortly after, Elsa would meet Meili, who had a guilty low with her, and it was that beast that Elsa used to get quickly to the mission points. They just have a chat, commenting on the things Elsa did in this novel. Things you already know from the revelations I'm telling you in this video. But the most interesting thing is that Meili points out that Elsa didn't get the money for the mission payments and has also turned all of Gusteko against her, which will make it difficult for Capella to operate in that region. Meili concludes by saying that their mother will be furious, although it seems that Elsa doesn't care about that. What I'm about to say now is something I don't remember where I got it from, but I still think it's a great headcanon. Do you remember how Meili was punished by Capella? Well, I would swear I read that when Elsa was punished the same way, she didn't care about anything, since her nature simply didn't allow her to break like Meili. And honestly, after seeing how careless Elsa can be, I believe it. I hope that one day I remember the excerpt of where I read this. Finally, Because the girls can no longer operate easily in Gusteko, they decided which nation they would go to next. And while they were discarding Kararagi, Elsa says that her instinct tells her they should go to the Dragon Kingdom, that is, to Lugunica. And that would be the end of the events of this novel. Now, the only thing left pending are the events of the side stories that take place during the time Elsa spent in Lugunica. But before we continue, I would like to comment on something quickly. You see, it seems that the author will soon release an additional novel about Elsa. One that, although it hasn't been released yet, has already given a hint about what it will be about. It is said that it will be a fight she had against Cecilis Segmund, the strongest man in the country of Wallachia. Obviously, Elsa will lose, but I still want to read that story. It can also be said that, canonically, that novel already happened, it just needs to be narrated in detail. I think the most confusing thing is trying to establish in which year this happened, but that is already the author's job to clarify when he publishes his version. And now we move on to the third and final part of Elsa's story. I want you to understand that by this third part, I mean all the stories that take place during and after episode 1 of the anime. Fortunately, the ones coming up are shorter, so this last section won't take very long. The first story we have to consider about Elsa is the one called Feldchan's Job, which takes place just hours before Felt steals the insignia from Emilia. This is a story that mostly focuses on the thoughts Felt had before robbing the candidate. In fact, I talk about it in this video you see on the screen, but the only thing that matters for this video and for Elsa is the part where we see how Elsa negotiates with Felt for the theft and promises her a payment of 10 holy coins. After that, the events where Subaru arrives, ruins Elsa's plans, and saves Emilia would happen. But Reinhard also stepped in during this situation and seriously wounded Elsa, so she is forced to run away. Well, there is a side story that tells us how Elsa was able to escape, even though Reinhard warned the guards about her. And honestly, it's an interesting story because it shows us a side of Meili's power that few people know about, and it went like this. Did you know that this interesting illustration of Elsa from a light novel revealed something important about Meili? After Elsa lost to Reinhard, the capital's slums were placed on high alert. The guards were hunting for the assassin based on her physical description while looking down at the citizens with contempt. In the middle of all this commotion, Meili, a young girl with blue braids, moved lightly through the gloomiest areas. The little girl slipped into an old hideout until she found a body covered in red inside one of the rooms. The red body turned out to be Elsa Granhiert, who sat up as soon as she heard the girl enter. Despite having been easily defeated, the woman seemed ecstatic over the aftermath of the encounter on her body. Resigned, Meili agreed to listen to the story while insisting on tending to Elsa's severe wounds. As she stripped off her destroyed clothes, a vertical wound was revealed that defied her usual regeneration abilities. Meili questioned if the one responsible was the Sword Saint, which was confirmed by a visibly thrilled Elsa. The assassin recounted how, even though the knight didn't use his legendary weapon, she felt completely powerless against his strength. Furthermore, she adds that for some reason, the wounds caused by that man take a long time to heal. Meili watched with incredulity at her companion's joy after such a crushing defeat. She admitted she always thought Elsa would never lose. Elsa reminded her that she had already gone through something similar against the strongest warrior of the Wallachian Empire, though at least on that occasion, she managed to kill the hostage. While she told this story, the healing was performed using water slug mucus, a substance Meili applied knowing that Elsa's physiology would withstand the poison. After the treatment, they needed to get clean clothes to move around without suspicion. Elsa simply entered a house, and instantly, Meili began to hear the sound of distant screams. A short while later, Elsa walked out wearing baggy men's clothes. Meili sighed because she would have to clean off the soaked-in blood. Soon after, the two were walking down the main street under a different appearance. Somehow, Meili is able to use parts of witch beasts to alter the color of her hair and eyes, effectively evading the wanted posters. Elsa, sporting men's clothes and a seductive figure, even managed to get a young guard to offer to escort them without ever suspecting their identity. During the journey, Meili reprimanded her for her unnecessary brutality in getting the clothes. But Elsa simply joked that since those men weren't gentlemen, she had to kill them. Although they planned to go into hiding, the discovery of a magic letter from their employer changed their plans. The message, which disintegrated after being read, pointed to the mansion of Margrave Roswell Mathers as the next objective, and it was a task for Meili alone. To Elsa's frustration, the orders dictated that she had to rest while the girl executed the job. With resignation, Elsa promised to wait while she did some knitting. She asked Meili what kind of plushie she would like this time. Meili simply told her to make a plushie of the thing she was thinking about most at that moment. And so, Elsa would knit a Reinhard plushie that would later be mentioned in another novel, but that's a story you don't know. After this, Elsa is asked to rest and calm down for a while, and during this time, the events at the mansion took place, meaning the events of Arc 2. You know, when Subaru met the twins and Rem falls in love with him. Something interesting that maybe very few people noticed is that Meili disappears from one moment to the next, and the excuse given is that her family members took her away in the middle of the events of this arc. And the side story that I will play for you now reveals who this sudden family member was, and it went like this. Did you know that Elsa is so talented at sewing that she occasionally gives custom handmade plushies to Meili? This might be hard to believe since Elsa is such a ruthless assassin, but one of the novels describes how she actually had this hobby whenever she wasn't out on a mission. After Meili failed her task of bringing chaos to the mansion of a certain strange noble, Elsa picked her up and escorted her away from Arlem village through the mountains. It's said that Elsa Granhiert's laughter echoed through the trees with a joy that stood in sharp contrast to her young companion's indignation. Meili Portrout, exhausted and with her cheeks puffed out in anger, scolded her. She found it incomprehensible that the Bowl Hunter could be in such a good mood while they were literally fleeing for their lives in the middle of the dark. Elsa, brushing it off, mocked the girl's over-reliance on her pets and pointed out that a little exercise would do her some good, even admitting she enjoyed that the roles were reversed, since last time it was Meili who came to her rescue. Now it was Elsa's turn to help Meili. However, the strain of mountain trekking in the wrong shoes finally wore out the little Beast tamer, who collapsed onto a log demanding a break. While catching her breath, some Meili expressed her frustration over how her woolgarms had been incinerated by an eccentric mage who rained fire from the sky. Elsa then commented on how interesting that man must be to pull off such a feat, and when asked if she felt any attraction toward the sorcerer, she coldly clarified that her only interest lay in people's beautiful insides. But speaking of strong people, Elsa remembered something and proceeded to give Meili a small hand-knitted plushie representing the Sword Saint. Meili, though she accepted the gift with affection, couldn't help but mock her companion's strange fixation on recreating, in such detail, the man who had almost ended her life. Later, noticing that the little girl's feet were hurting, Elsa offered to carry her on her back to pick up the pace. Despite Meili's initial complaints about the rough movement, the physical pain forced her to accept the gesture, and she soon found herself swept up in a frantic sprint through the forest. Unfortunately, their escape was interrupted when a surviving Volgarm from Meili's pack emerged from the bushes with a hostile attitude. While Elsa was ready to execute the beast, Meili stepped in, using her power to instinctively subdue it. With an unusual sense of responsibility, the girl warned the monster to hide in the mountains and rebuild its pack far away from that flying mage. She then admitted to Elsa that it pained her to send the creatures to a certain death because of a mistake she had made herself. After ensuring the pack's escape, Meili ordered Elsa to keep moving, promising herself internally that the next time she helped Elsa, she would ask for a Volgarm plushie as payment. However, that next time would never come, as Elsa would die in the very next mission, and Meili would carry that regret with her in another novel. But that's a story you don't know yet. As we can see, interesting things are told in this story, things that match what we have seen from Elsa, her passion for making dolls and her care for Meili. Even though Elsa and Meili are assassins, I always like this kind of dynamic they carried. It helped Elsa back then to be the younger sister of the Featherroom girls because, thanks to that experience, she was now able to act as a sort of older sister for Meili. Then, the other novel that would talk about her would be a novel set during the events of Arc 4, or the second season. You know, it happens right at the time when Subaru was going through the events of the Sanctuary, and it's a chat that Meili and Elsa have, which I covered in a short for your enjoyment, and it went like this. Did you know there's a novel that tells the story of how Elsa and Meili first met? The most interesting part is that this story will likely be featured in the upcoming 4th season. They say the first time Elsa saw her was in a field of corpses. In the middle of slaughtered beasts stood a little girl, filthy and covered only by a scrap of cloth. The strange thing was that the bodies surrounding her were those of beasts, not humans, and the one who had killed them all was a teenage Elsa. Despite the knife she carried, she possessed a certain wicked allure. She told the girl she wasn't going to hurt her, as she'd been ordered to bring her back alive. The little one stared at her with pure hatred. Elsa commented that with that attitude, she looked like a beast princess. The little girl only growled. Right then, the king of the forest appeared. Elsa, far from being scared, licked her lips and remarked how fabulous it was to have such a big friend. The beast attacked, but Elsa dodged and, with a single slash, took off its front leg. As she prepared to finish it off, she whispered that she wanted to see what kind of bowels it had. The fight was completely one-sided. Elsa dodged and severed parts of the beast, which could only moan, begging for death. While rummaging through its guts, the young woman asked the little girl if she could call another one just so she could compare their entrails. The girl didn't answer. She just glared with hate, knowing she had lost her best weapon. Elsa walked toward her and picked her up gently. She told her not to worry, that she was taking her back. The little one struggled and began to bite her neck in a rage, while Elsa simply remarked that being hated that much wasn't very pleasant. But in her current state, the girl's bites only tickled. Years later, the little one, now known as Mei Li, pressed her lips against Elsa's neck. Elsa asked what she was doing. Mei Li said she was remembering the time she tried to kill her by biting her like that. Elsa smiled and said it was like being bitten by a puppy, to which Mei Li reminded her that she had killed all her beasts, so she still wanted to kill Elsa in the worst way possible. Elsa said that she'd made it clear from the start she wasn't going to kill her. Mei Li shot back, asking who would ever believe her after seeing her tear her beasts apart. The assassin simply commented on how much Mei Li had changed, how she now spoke properly instead of just making guttural sounds. The younger girl just said it wasn't fair for Elsa to speak so lightly to someone who was suffering. Elsa looked at her, confused. She insisted that if she hadn't gone looking for her, she would have missed out on knowing her, adding that she felt Mei Li was like her sister now. Mei Li was left speechless by the unusual display of affection and called her a weirdo. Elsa nodded, saying it was precisely because they were both weirdos that they could be together like this. Then, stroking the braid that the girl had made for her, Elsa said she'd gotten much better at it. Mei Li told her that if she kept exposing her neck, she'd end up biting her to death. Elsa remarked that she trusted Mei Li wouldn't really bite anymore, to which Mei Li asked if Elsa still wanted to cut her stomach open. Elsa thought about it and replied that she was still interested in her insides, but not enough to destroy what they had. After a silence, Mei Li moved closer to her on the sofa. From a distance, without the stench of blood, they looked like two sisters chatting in peace. And it's this memory that will complicate things for Subaru in the 4th season.
The most curious thing is that the break time of episode 11 of the 2nd season added a new scene where Elsa talked a bit more in detail about what she thought of Subaru. She says she dislikes that boy because of his eyes, and when she is asked what she means regarding Subaru's look, she just says the protagonist doesn't look like someone who accepts or resists death, but rather someone who feels that death is not the end for him. In fact, she adds Roswell to that same category. In case you don't get it, Elsa says this because of Subaru and Roswell's ability to, so to speak, be reborn. Subaru with his return by death power, and Roswell thanks to his descendants. It's curious how, in a way, Elsa sensed the secrets of both characters. Even though there is still one more side story left that closes Elsa's life, in reality, there is something important that the anime skipped and helps us better understand her powers. I'm talking about the fact that canonically, Elsa's end wasn't in her defeat against Garfield, but rather she, or better said what was left of her, stayed alive wandering around the mansion. Unfortunately, by that time Garfield was no longer around to handle the situation, and it was up to Subaru to deal with Elsa's remains while dodging the guilty Lo, who wasn't completely burned down by the fire Otto started, and it went like this.
Did you know that Elsa didn't actually die in her duel against Garfield? Well, technically yes, and at the same time no. I say this because the novel tells how the remains of the Bubble Hunter kept moving to count down Subaru even after her defeat against the Sanctuary's shield. It all starts in the middle of the fierce mansion fire, right when Subaru unconsciously covered himself in miasma to enter the mansion one last time. It is said that he hears a wet sound in the main hallway and sees Elsa emerge from the flames, holding her black kukri.
Subaru licks his lips, forgetting his discomfort while leaning on the strength of his valuable allies like Otto, Ram, Garfield, Petra, Frederica, and Amelia to keep standing firm. Noticing her dark, empty eyes, Subaru understands that this thing is no longer Elsa, but a soulless corpse driven by an endless bloodlust, dragging her wrecked lower body through the raging fire. Seeing that she is crawling slowly, Subaru decides to leave her behind to keep looking for Beatrice, but the corpse reacts instantly, slashing the steps with her blade to claim his life. Subaru runs desperately toward the upper floors, fleeing from the thick black smoke that hurts his lungs. Upon reaching the 3rd floor, a guilty Lo emerges, the very one because of which Otto set the mansion on fire. It appears from the flames, horribly burned and without a mane, to attack him with its lethal claws. Subaru dodges the deadly hit by rolling on the floor, but Elsa's corpse appears and fiercely attacks the beast for getting in her way, cutting off one of its hind legs with a single slash. The wound draws black blood and the beast fights back with its snake tail, but the undead woman dodges it with inhuman reflexes and decapitates it at the base, unilaterally wrecking the monster. Subaru takes advantage of the distraction to kick open the doors of the top floor, looking for a safe exit. At this moment in the anime, Subaru would head to the last door standing in the mansion, while Elsa's remains murdered the animal. When Elsa finishes with this beast, her flesh is destroyed beyond her healing capacity, while at the same time she holds the beast's heart in her left hand. Guided by a blind obsession and an endless sense of duty, the corpse reaches the door at the back, the very same door Subaru had reached moments before, and launches a brutal attack to slice her prey. However, upon breaking the door, oxygen suddenly rushes into the underground tunnel, where incomplete combustion was taking place. Upon making contact with the air, a devastating backdraft explosion is generated, a physical phenomenon that the corpse, stripped of reason, could not predict in any way. The flames engulf Elsa's body, reducing her decaying remains to ashes immediately. The fire expands through the underground hallway and the spiral staircase, destroying the study and completely consuming the doors of the Rosewall mansion, sealing the tragic end not only of the building, but also of the Bowel Hunter. But that is a story you already know.
Afterward, Elsa would die for good, but there would still be a reflection on her life given by Meili, a reflection where she shows us that Elsa had actually already lost the will to live. Now I will play the short that talks in detail about this, but I ask you to stay, because there is still an important last detail about Elsa to mention, but the short starts like this. Did you know that Elsa's death had emotional consequences for Meili? Unfortunately, the anime couldn't show it entirely, and although it made an attempt, it failed to capture every detail. Shortly after the mansion burned down, and while Subaru was dealing with the Great Rabbit alongside Emilia and Bayako, Meili was searching for something among the charred remains of the estate. She was looking for something she knew wasn't there. A fact pointed out to her by Garfield, who stood with his back turned while keeping watch over her. Despite his threats to finish her off if she tried anything, the girl knew it was just a bluff and that the boy wasn't actually going to hurt her. Then, he asked her if this search was actually helping her in any way. Moved by his rough empathy, Meili closed her eyes and gave a melancholic smile. She knew she wouldn't find any trace of the person she was looking for. Suddenly, she remembered how she had once asked Elsa if she was immortal. Meili had assumed so after seeing her regenerate from all kinds of wounds. But Elsa simply explained that after being sold as a child slave in Gustako, her buyer had used a cursed art on her, turning her into a cursed doll. A curse that prevented the subject from dying until they had killed their target. So it wasn't that she was immortal, but rather, in her own words, she was someone incapable of dying. Puzzled by the way Elsa gave her answer, Meili asked her if she wished she could just die already. The older woman, tilting her head in genuine confusion, assured her she had no desire to die. She enjoyed the smell of blood and torn flesh far too much. That curse allowed her to feel alive over and over again. Then, stroking Meili's head with blood-stained hands, Elsa tenderly teased her, saying she looked so sad and lonely, worrying about her death. Angered by the blood matting her hair, Meili scolded her for being so careless with her appearance and dragged her by the hand to flee the area, warning her that she needed to focus more or she would end up dying first, leaving Elsa alone with her immortal body. Elsa only gave a mysterious smile on that occasion. Back in the present, standing before the smoking ruins of the mansion, Meili held back the pain. Elsa had survived stabbings and broken necks, but she had finally been reduced to ash. Only then did Meili realize that Elsa had lied to her that day and actually wanted to die. After all, for someone who only felt alive when killing others, it meant she found her own life worthless. At the very least, dying there, fighting until her last breath, must have been a blessing. Having finished remembering Elsa, Meili thanked Garfield and told him she was satisfied now. The boy looked at her with irritation and told her bluntly that if she wanted to cry, he wasn't going to stop her. Meili didn't understand why he said it, but feeling the sting in her eyes, she looked up at the sky to hide her face and let her repressed emotions finally overflow. Garfield remained silent, allowing the girl to cry. It's said they never spoke of what happened that night again, though this wouldn't be the last time Meili thought about all this, as later on, in a novel featuring Reinhardt and Volcanica, she would have to think about her old companion once more. But that's a story you don't know yet.
To be honest, I don't have much to add to Meili's final reflection on Elsa's life. I think if a person stops looking for excitement or goals in their life and just lives by inertia, then maybe they aren't truly enjoying life like someone who does have a clear goal and knows the path to take. I think it must be very sad that you only find excitement through other people and not through yourself. But I don't want to start rambling anymore. Surely someone with more knowledge on these types of topics can explain my idea better than I can. I just want to finish this video now. I know that later on there is a story about Meili where she thinks about Elsa, but it's nothing that adds to Elsa's character itself. It's just specific mentions of the Bowel Hunter and nothing more. Elsa's story has already ended, and that makes me a bit sad because I feel like maybe it could have been expanded on a bit. I'm not saying they should forgive her and have her join the good guys, or maybe I only think this after reading all her novels, but I can't shake the feeling that something else was missing in her story. I know that technically she could be brought back to life, if Felix used his power, but I prefer not to think about that. Now I will take the chance to answer some questions there are regarding her. Why did Elsa die if she was immortal? Elsa wasn't immortal, she was just someone with a very good healing power, and I find two explanations for her death, and I feel both are just as good. At least I made sure to discuss them with some people who I know, also read Elsa's lore, and didn't just watch this video. The first explanation is that Elsa's healing power had really already reached its limit in her fight against Garfield, and proof of that is that her blood and wounds stopped healing. Maybe you think the Elsa versus Garfield fight didn't last that long because we only saw a few minutes in the anime. But in reality, this fight was cut down and lasted longer than it seems. Time in which Garfield could have perfectly covered her in wounds that pushed her power to the limit. And of course, remember that a hit from Subaru is not the same as a hit from Garfield, who easily multiplies the impact and damage the protagonist could do by thousands of times. And this translates into a need for greater healing in the assassin's body. Also, it was influenced by the fact that Garfield recreated a memory of Elsa's. The memory of the first time she felt alive by discovering her passion for insides. Remember that Elsa wanted to die? Well, at this moment in the anime, she was already in her last seconds of life, and had just remembered her first murder, which gives off total vibes that she was already satisfied with her existence at that point, and that's why she let herself be killed. Also, it's not like Elsa shows a lot of respect for Capella, or feels the need to serve her. Let's remember that Elsa was threatened. What am I trying to get at with all this? Simple. Elsa no longer had the desire to keep living. She wanted to die, and she saw that even if she died, Meili would be safe. I think we can see a certain pattern. The second possible explanation is one that has to do with the origin of curses and authorities. In case you don't know, curses are attempts to recreate authorities, and since authorities get stronger the more the user gives up of themselves, see the case of Subaru using Betelgeuse's hand more efficiently with no recoil when entering madness, or the case of Petra who gave up more of her own things when using Klin's power. Well, you get what I mean. In Elsa's case, her novel confirms that the more conviction and desire to live she has, then her healing power will keep being exceptional. But we know Elsa didn't feel comfortable with her own life, and on top of that, seeing how her enemies save Meili probably took away one of the few things for which she could keep staying alive, protecting Meili from Capella. And to this we have to add that in the Apocalypse Girls novel itself, it is said that a doll's healing power starts to fail when they truly start to need and want their target's death. And if we remember her last moments of life, Elsa had kind of become obsessed with Garfield, at least enough to give him some pretty intense messages. I also think another variable that is present in both cases and helped her defeat was a habit of hers that worked against her, her sadism. You see, Elsa is the type who likes to play with her prey, and this worked against her. It was because she played against her opponents in the first arc that eventually made Reinhard arrive and caused her to lose. It was because she played with Petra and Frederica that eventually Garfield arrived to stop her, and this is a constant in her encounters. The fact that you start playing around makes you inefficient, because you start revealing your cards bit by bit, and that in a duel against an equal like Garfield or Reinhard ended up costing the Bowl Hunter dearly. While I was editing this, a friend gave me another interesting perspective on the reason for Elsa's death. A reason I can't go into detail about, but will leave on screen in case someone wants to take a screenshot and read it. I think the most interesting thing she contributed is a detail that even I didn't notice. No matter how much Elsa is almost immortal, that doesn't change the fact that her human body wasn't conceived and created to operate in that way. This would bring certain biological limitations to her power, and the logic of this is explained in the text I'm showing on screen. A text that, I repeat, I invite you to read. Anyway, let's just leave it at Elsa's power at this moment stopped working for several reasons that neither I nor other readers fully understand, and I think the most direct thing would be to ask Tape in a Q&A session. I would do it myself, but I am already very tired. Another question I usually see regarding the character is her appearance as a kind of ghost in the third season. There are two answers for this. A long answer that has something to do with the worldview Garfield handles, which I can't cover here in an Elsa video. Who knows? Maybe when I make the video on all of Garfield's novels, I'll answer it there. But I can give you the short answer, as it involves Elsa. Elsa really died in the second season, but because it was Garfield who killed her, the boy's mind still remembered that, and that's why when he starts to have his emotional lows, the memory of Elsa appears to torture him psychologically. And with this, I finish everything related to Elsa in the novels to this day. This video took way longer than I planned, and I still owe the EX1 video, which will also be long. Unfortunately, right now we are at the peak of the fourth season, and disconnecting for many weeks just to make a single video doesn't feel productive. When will I make the EX1? When season 4 ends, since these days I want to focus on making other videos, but I can assure you that the EX1 video will be on a higher level than this one. Thanks for making it to this part of the video, and if you watched it all the way through, I would appreciate it if you answer the following. Did this review of Elsa's life manage to change your perspective on her? If it did, tell me how it happened. On my part, I think my thoughts on the Bowl Hunter were already reflected throughout all of this, but I'm always interested to know if I caused the same effect on people, so don't hesitate to comment on it. By the way, I'll leave you my Instagram. I don't upload anything about ReZero there, but every now and then I like to share pieces of my day-to-day life or answer messages, so feel free to follow me if you want to. But that has been all for today. Thanks for playing this video, thanks for staying until the end, and thanks for watching.